Good evening, everybody. It's about time to get started, so if you'll take your seats, we'll get this party started. All right. Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the February 13th, 2018 meeting of the Placerville City Council. And at this time, I invite you to rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before I start off tonight's meeting, I just have to say I had an occasion to be at the County Planning Commission this week. They did a great job, but it took about 4.5 hours to get to the item that I was there to hear. And so I have just a newfound respect for all of you that join us at our city council meetings and those that watch at home. We appreciate you participating in local government, and I know it's not always an easy thing to do, so thank you for being here tonight. And before we have the roll call, I would like to announce that Councilmember Wilkins is on a leave of absence through the month of February. So with that, Regina, may we have the roll call?
Vice Mayor Acuna?
Here.
Councilmember Borelli?
Here.
Mayor Thomas?
Here.
Councilmember Clarici?
Here.
And Councilmember Wilkins will be noted as absent.
Thank you. All right. Item 3.1, brief comments by the City Council. We will start with you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Have a couple of three pleasant announcements that I'd like to share with the communities. Since we don't have a standing room only audience, I think it's appropriate to take a minute to do this. First of all, I'd like to thank Roy Carter. Him and his wife Pearl have been instrumental in helping Goldbug Park get some new gold pending troughs constructed. And those are being delivered to the park this week as he's wrapping that project up. And then the Eagle Scout is going to take over as his Eagle Scout project to coordinate the actual installation of the new troughs. So thanks to Roy Carter for the donation of his woodworking shop and all of his labor for that project. Secondly, I received in the mail just recently, we frequently hear here at our meetings that the need to preserve our historic heritage in El Dorado County. And I've been a member of the El Dorado County Historical Society for well over 10 or 15 years now. Their membership is probably a little over 100, which shocks me, the number of concerns and issues that are brought to this council and concerns throughout the county that in this rich historic county, a very well-run historical foundation only musters 100 members. They certainly need a boost in membership. You can get an application to support the Historical Society right across the street at the Fountain Talman Museum, or you can get it Wednesday through Saturday at the County Museum. So if you have a real interest, as we hear frequently from so many people, please put that interest into some real action at the Historical Society. And then lastly, an organization that's been here in the county celebrated their 25th anniversary last year, and that's the Sierra Wildlife Rescue. I've been a member of that for a number of years also. They were just instrumental in helping rescue the trapped coyote. It had its head trapped in a plastic jar for well over a week or 10 days. They, along with a couple of other organizations, managed to capture the coyote over outside of Cool, so in the north part of the county. So Sierra Wildlife frequently, and there's every day on Facebook, you'll see someone finds a squirrel, a bird, a dog, a possum. Who do I call? Someone always says call Sierra Wildlife Rescue. Well, they also need our help more than just the recommendation. They got plenty of those. What they need is volunteers. What they need is donations, no matter how big or small. They do a tremendous job rehabilitating under all appropriate licenses hundreds and hundreds of wildlife members of our community every year. So thank you for allowing me the time to give all three of those projects a little shout out this evening.
Great. Thank you so much. Councilmember Borelli.
Yes, I also have another community project. This is called Community Hubs, and it's a new program that's been started. Wendy and I had the pleasure of going to, and John,
John?
I'm sorry, John. We went to the library, and it was just really an enlightening, I thought, and we watched Supervisor Beerkamp read a book to the kids, but what it is it's community hubs are a partnership between First Five, El Dorado, EDC Library, EDC Early Care and Education Planning Council, EDC Child Abuse Prevention Council, EDC Health and Human Services Agency's Maternal, Child, and Adolescent Health Program and Mental Health Services. And there we have a total of 5. We have the El Dorado Hills Library, the Cameron Park Library, the Placerville Library, Georgetown Library, and South Lake Tahoe Library. They figured that those were good, a good meeting place because everybody goes to the library and the kids are welcome and everything, but it's a coalition of all of these groups to offer our community to offer that help to families. And the program is just getting off the ground. We invited them to come and maybe do a short program for us and explain all this, but it was really impressive, and it's something that we really need here in our county. So, anyway,
Thank you. Yeah, it's an exciting program. Thank you. Councilmember Clarici.
Okay. Some of you may know that last September, we had the first annual Apple Core Fringe Festival, which was a series of little vignette performances of a different kind of nature at various venues on Main Street. And it went very well. And the young man, not Gavin Newsom. No, I wouldn't wish that on. Gavin Sellers, thank you,
right.
Gavin Sellers, who's a graduate of El Dorado High School and very much into drama. He was the one who brought it to Placerville. He's a young person, really exemplary. You know, he's a young person, born here, raised here, coming back to the community and doing something very interesting. I'm happy to say that there'll be a second annual Apple Core Fringe Festival in September, and what we're hoping to do, last year we tried to do it, but there's a bit more of an effort than we anticipated, and that is we're going to try to make Confidence, Old City Hall, available for the performances. This does not mean that it will be available for permanent habitation, because that's going to require a much heavier lift. But we are hoping to maybe do some stuff with that space on the first floor so that they could have performances in there, which I think would be very cool. So anyway, so this is just a very nice thing, a wonderful young man and his friends that are putting this on, and it'll be part of our town next September, sometime on the weekends. It takes 2 weekends. So anyway, that's my thing.
That was fun to attend last year. Loved it. All right, and briefly, for those of you who haven't heard, Amgem is coming through Placerville, which is very exciting this year. And so starting actually May 18th, I understand they'll be coming up Green Valley Road and through Placerville Drive to Main Street to Cedar Ravine and out Pleasant Valley Road. So we're just super excited. We're starting to think about how we can welcome them in grand style to the city of Placerville, and over 192 countries will be watching this race, and it's the men's 6th leg of their race. So we're just real excited to think about the possibilities. So put your thinking cap on, and we'll show them what a good old hometown American hospitality is like here in Placerville.
I'm so excited about
know.
this too, because for years we've kind of, every time we see this happening around us, we're going, why aren't they in El Dorado County? Why aren't they here? So
It's real exciting.
I'm glad.
Exactly. And for those of you who have seen these little orange cards on the back of the table back there, and if any of you are interested in receiving communications with us about Planning Commission or City Council agendas, give us your name and number and how to contact you, and we'll make sure you get the information you're looking for. And lastly, I want to give a shout out to my grandson, Dagan. I love it when young people are here in our audience, and it's always good to have them here tonight. So glad you're here, Dagan.
Wendy, one more thing. Again, I think we ought to acknowledge the new DA's office.
Yes, please do.
Wendy and John and I went, and so let's tell them.
We're real excited to have the El Dorado County District Attorney here once again on Main Street. They relocated from their offices to brand new headquarters at the old Inova building off of Pacific Street, and the Chamber of Commerce did an awesome opening for their new headquarters, and it is so good to see that gorgeous building alive with activity again, and to have the DA's office here on Main Street in Placerville. So that's That's good for everyone. Great, thank you for that. All right.
Madam Mayor, how many
Yes.
employees does the district attorney have over on Pacific Street now?
I don't know off the top of my
think
head.
it's
He
Around
shared-
70.
he
It's
told
like
me
68 or
64.
Okay, it was a number.
64.
And that's a lot of people getting lunches and shopping in town and
But
a
thank,
lot of
you know,
economic
and
activity.
why, happy that they stayed.
That's
and
right.
Yeah,
still-
so that's tremendous. We were
It
able to
is.
keep those jobs in town.
Great. Amen. All right.
Thank you.
Closed session report. Do we have anything to report? City Attorney Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The closed session report is that we don't have anything to report. Council did not take reportable action tonight.
Thank you. And we're at the adoption of the agenda. I would like to entertain a motion to, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we do not need to do that. Never mind. All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion
Move
to
for
approve the
adoption.
agenda.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Ceremonial matters, none. All right. Now it's time for you to speak. This portion of the meeting is reserved for anyone that wishes to address the council on any matter within our jurisdiction. This is for items that aren't on our agenda tonight. So if you'd like to speak, please come forward, state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes. So we welcome you to the podium.
Good evening, City Council.
Good evening.
My name is Melissa Calvert, and I'm here representing Leadership El Dorado. Leadership El Dorado's mission is to provide education and training to help build El Dorado County's future leaders. And upon graduation, each class is challenged to come together and pick a cause in our community to lift up and bring attention to. And this is why I'm here today. In early America, whole communities gathered to help each other raise or build their barns. Taking a cue from this tradition, Leadership El Dorado, Class 11, is extremely honored to bring about an event that will engage our community and raise financial capital for a hog barn at Union Mine High School. On June 2nd, 2018, Leadership El Dorado, Class 11, will be hosting our first annual Farm to Pork dinner. That's Farm to Pork.
We got it.
We will be turning the top floor of the Main Street parking garage into an open-air restaurant.
Oh.
Guests at the family-style meal will be treated to a feast highlighting delicious collaborations between El Dorado County chefs, farms, wineries, distilleries, and breweries. And I would like to personally invite each of you and a guest to be part of this incredible evening. And tonight we've brought our invitations for you and chocolate dipped strawberries, so you won't forget us.
What is the date again?
June 2nd,
June 2nd.
and it'll be from 7 to 10.
Well,
How
thank
incredible. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Melissa.
thank you.
It was
7 to 10.
What a fun project.
Thank you
Amazing,
for
huh?
that, because somebody told me about this, and I
Woo,
said,
yay.
I have no idea what you're talking about. And I do remember that we used to do, years ago, there was like a
Starlight Ball.
The Starlight Ball.
Starlight
Yes.
Ball up on the 3rd floor, so it works for that sort of thing. So
Yeah, it's going to be
anyway,
gorgeous.
Very
Oh.
good.
Thank you, guys.
Love the concept.
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Excellent.
Would anyone else like to address the council? Did you bring strawberries, Michael? No, sorry.
No.
Good evening.
Did she bring enough for the whole class?
Good evening.
That is an awesome thing. Okay,
You state your name for the record.
Michael Drubish.
Thank you.
Thank you to Vice Mayor Kuna in mentioning preserving our wonderful historical resources. And yes, I agree that more people should join up. But perhaps they don't due to a perceived maybe ambivalence or inaction on part of the city council, because it's been almost 4 years since the city council unanimously voted to start the process of making Main Street downtown a historic district, and nothing's happened. So I'm hoping that our city council can get the ball re-rolling, get people fired up again. As soon as that starts, I'm sure the historical people will come out of the woodwork to help fill out the details, and we can make that accomplished. And then just a quick question, did the Main Street garbage cans that got replaced, did the old ones get recycled to other city properties or just thrown away?
We'll get that answer for you. Thank you, Michael. Would anyone else like to come forward? All right, seeing none, I'll close public comment, and let's get that answer. Did we recycle our trash cans? Or what,
We still
what
have
happened to
them, and we'll be placing them throughout the parks as needed.
Great. All right. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate
Kind
it.
of recycling.
Absolutely.
Reusing.
Reusing. Okay. Oh, and
If I can, I just would say, regarding the Main Street Historical Society District, I thought maybe Michael was going to say we had to abolish the Historical Review Committee because nobody wanted to be on it. Maybe that speaks to what I was getting to, too. It's difficult. All these organizations need our help. So, and we'll look into the other issue.
thank you. And forgive me, I forgot to ask if we had any written communication.
Mayor and council, there's just one item of written communication that you have before you that came in today, and it's related to item 11.2 on your agenda.
Great, and we have it in front of us. Thank you very much. Got ahead of myself. All right. We are on the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion unless any member of the council wishes to remove an item for discussion. Does any council member wish to do so? No. Does any member of the public wish to comment on any item on the consent calendar? No? All right. Seeing none, I would like to make a comment on item 8.4, which is, we got the Measure J report that says how we're doing on our 0.25% sales taxes to support police services and to augment base salaries so we remain somewhat competitive so we can retain good police officers here in the city of Placerville. And happy to see, Dave, that the third quarter of 2017 in terms of our sales tax was a growth of 4.93%, which equates to moderate growth in sales tax, which is always a good thing. So grateful for that. And I wanted to acknowledge that item 8.5 on the housing element progress report, that is a requirement of our housing element. And once again, we are fully compliant with our housing element. Is that correct, Director Rivas?
That is correct.
That is wonderful, and that was hard earned. So thank you so much for that. All right. Do I have a motion? For
I'll move for approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
All those, roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Mayor Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Clarici?
Aye.
All right, thank you. There are no items pulled from the consent calendar and no ordinances tonight. Oh, actually, there is. You have to turn the page. One ordinance, item 10.1. The action before us is to waive the second reading and adopt an ordinance adopting changes to Title IX of the Placerville Municipal Code relating to parking. Mr. Morris.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you know, this is at least the third time this has been before you. At the last meeting, there were some minor changes you made to the ordinance. Those are reflected in the ordinance that is attached to the staff report tonight. In addition, I need to note that there was one typo correction that we still need to make on there, and that is in the, let me get to it here, Section 3.9.3.8, restricted parking. If you look under the section for Pacific Street, it still had the Monday through Sunday and 8 to 7 time frame in there. That was one that we missed in going through all of this. So this is simply making it consistent with what you've already done, Monday through Saturday, 8 to 6. Okay. Other than that, we did go through and make, I believe, most of the changes that were reflected at the last meeting, and those are shown in in the document that is before you tonight. That includes, on that same page that I just referred to, the elimination of, or actually it's on a different page, but on that page it shows the elimination of the zone up on Ray Lawyer Drive next to Consumers College that we noted at the last meeting. Right. We also in here removed on the page previous to that on Main Street the 12-minute parking space at 525 Main Street. So that was done, and then further towards the end we did change the definition that was brought up to us that we felt was not as good as it could be, and so we made some corrections to that definition, and that's shown under section 9-4-6. With that, the action tonight, unless you have any questions, is to waive the second reading of this ordinance and move for adoption.
Great. Thank you so much. Do council members have any questions? Councilmember Clarici?
I have a question for Councilmember Acuna.
All right.
Councilmember Acuna. If I remember correctly, back at our previous meeting, you were the one who suggested taking the one parking space, emphasis on the word one parking space, in front of the now vacant district attorney's office, which is, I believe, was a 12-minute parking space, and removing it. Could you explain the reasoning behind that? Thank you.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. In fact, I understand there was a communication that incorrectly stated my reasoning or my thinking behind making that request. And that was that every morning and every afternoon, Monday through Friday, and certainly every Saturday and Sunday afternoon, the demand to make a right turn from westbound Main Street onto Bedford to access Highway 50 backs up past, it can back up past this building, for example, on a regular basis. It lasts for about an hour in the mornings, and it can last for a good couple hours every afternoon. By removing this one stall, now that the district attorney's operation is gone, this one stall was almost exclusively occupied by law enforcement officers. This was their 12-minute stall to go in, do their business as the DA's office or the public defender's office, and then get back in their unit and continue about their work. So with that gone, I thought it was a good opportunity for us to try and help the flow of the existing traffic that currently 7 days a week we have issues there. So this will give folks a chance to, once public works staff is able to make the minor changes, this will actually help make those right turn movements quite a bit smoother. There's also been several side swipes and rear end accidents there because people aren't watching what's going on when it piles up. It seemed like an opportunity to make very little impact to the parking, but have a big impact to the flow.
Thank you. I thought that might be it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I had a question for City Attorney.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Mr. Driscoll, were any of the changes that Mr. Morris outlined affect the ability to continue moving this forward and waiving the second reading and adopting the ordinance this evening?
Only if the changes which occurred since the first reading were substantial and not really clerical in nature or typographical. And so my answer to that is no.
No, so we can continue to move forward.
My understanding.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Burley? Oh, sorry.
I do it. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, I have no comment.
Okay.
I do have one more question. Did our proofreader get to read it? Did Sue Rodman get to read this? Because she has been the best one, I think, to go through this document and find references to the Cosumnes River College. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's
So
pretty
very good.
awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, we will give her a chance to speak, and anyone else that would like to speak on this item. Public comment is now open on this item. Please come forward and state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Kirk Smith of Placerville. I guess I just have a couple issues with what's been described relating to the parking that's down the street, the 12-minute zone. One is that, while I respect the learned counsel, the whole idea of these proceedings is not markup sessions as you have in Congress. The Brown Act requires you to make notice in advance so people know what to expect. And that item that you raised was raised after public comment was closed. So there was no chance to, at that time, address that issue. We were foreclosed to being able to do it. When it comes to the idea of that being principally used for the sheriff's office and those in law enforcement, I'm glad to hear that now, but because it's coming now, I can't present you the photographs I've taken over the years that show where officers have been. It was also described at one occasion that that was the narrowest spot. It actually got a 50-foot construction tape. If somebody wants to measure, it's not the most narrow spot. But when it comes to just one spot, as if one spot is only a small deal, for parking where it's desperately crucial, it is big. And what you could have done by being able to discuss it in advance was maybe look at some other spot that is now no parking that you could have made 12-minute zone, so there'd be a net no change. But when we come in here and we hear things like, the parklet, and someone wants to have 6 zones, as if 6 parking spaces being taken away is no big deal, it starts to add up one by one by one. And this is what you have on the other side. Now, when I went around and asked at the museum, who most of you have ever heard of this being done? None of them heard at the museum. And that's where I stop when I go to visit that museum, because I do pay dues to that group and actually go in there about once every 2 weeks. And I do business with an insurance company next door. And that 12-minute zone is just perfect for stopping in to sign documents and get out of there. So it's not just for law enforcement. And if you really want to help the business community downtown, then why not open up the 12 to, actually there's 24 spots there in the back of that old office. That office space would be nice to open up for public parking. I mentioned that to someone in the city a few weeks ago. So that would be really good to do. But I just think that in the case of making things open, that you put it in your proposals in advance. And then if it comes to what you're doing regarding this to accommodate the extra traffic from Clay Street, you've got a study that some had talked about being released Friday. Now it's going to be released a little later. And you're already doing studies. There were studies last week about checking for traffic patterns and still adding to it. So, I would be interested to know if anything you've seen in drafts so far relate to traffic issues for Clay Street and whether this has any relationship to it. In any event, those would be the kind of things that are important to bring out in advance when something like that is put on there. But I do think that one parking space is a big deal. And certainly in the name of openness, it'd be helpful to bring it by. You have got a parking advisory committee. So those are the reasons why I think it's ill-advised, and why if it's just one space, it'd be nice to open up one closed space now so that you have a net balance of making even. And that I think would be useful. So that's why I still am troubled by it, and hope you do more to expand parking for the downtown area that so desperately needs it. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Good evening, Sue.
Good evening. You got to hear from Sue Rodman, your proofreader in charge.
Proofreader extraordinaire.
I think Mark Acuna's suggestion is a really good one because I've seen traffic back up in that same spot. But I had 3 more comments from the parking ordinance revision. The current wording in page 7 and section 938 for restricted parking. Current wording is Clay Street, no parking on the west side at the Highway 50 overcrossing. For public safety, this needs to be no parking at the Highway 50 overcrossing on both sides of the street. Allowing parking on the east side of Clay Street at the Highway 50 overcrossing eliminates a safe sight distance in both directions. It's dangerous, especially for bicycles and pedestrians. Clay Street crosses the El Dorado Trail just a few feet from that Highway 50 overcrossing. The Main Street green zones on page 10, adjacent to the business at 525 Main Street, it's a blue overstrike, but there's no changes given. So I have no idea what that really means. Does that mean there will be no green zone there? Also, the green zones now are signed anywhere from 12 to 20 minutes. And are they all going to be 12-minute zones now? Or is it... some of them are 15 minutes. It seems like to change from 3 minutes to 12 minutes wouldn't be worth the cost of the sign or the repainting. Now, page 24, this 946, general and hourly parking restrictions, municipal lots, special parking limitations. We still have the Ivy House parking lot with a limit that you can't be there after 9 p.m. And I'm thinking, given the goal to avoid the area becoming a drug dealing or loitering area, could it be a solution for the Cosmic Cafe to obtain the permit from the police department for music or other events and avoid needing to place permit notices on vehicles by individuals? So could the business just get one permit from the police department, and then the police department would be notified that from some span of time, people would be in that parking lot and have it be okay? And that is all I have. Isn't that amazing?
That's a lot.
Thank you very much, Sue.
This is crazy.
Would anyone else like to speak? Hello again, Michael.
Good evening. I agree with Mr. Cuna's opening up that section there to improve traffic flow. So, and yes, to mitigating it, try and find one more spot to bring it back in. Just direct staff to squeeze another one in there somewhere. but not a compact space.
No, those don't work too well.
So going forward with the restricted parking zones, I'm not sure what's vastly cheaper, the painted curbs, the signage, whatever. I'd go with whatever's vastly cheaper, but I'd also lean more to reducing sign pollution. Fewer signs, please. The new parking signs that went in the lot between the post office and the Carry House, go in there and look at how many signs there are telling there's almost one sign per 2 stalls. It's ridiculous. And then did the corrections to the references in the parking ordinance, it references Stagecoach Alley as Center Street because it used to be Center Street. So did that get cleaned up? Because Center Street now it did. Okay, very good, thank you.
All right, thank you, Michael. Anyone else? All right, we'll close public comment on this and let's see, get some answers. First of all, I'd like to clarify an item. It was brought up that the separate issue, but that since parking is always an issue, the parklet was going to take up 6 zones. It was just take up one parking spot, right? Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. And let's see, on Mr. Morris, would you like to comment on any of the corrections on the Clay Street or Main Street or the green zone changes from 12 to 20 minutes, as well as the idea for a permit for the Cosmic Cafe, because I know we talked about that at the last meeting. Accommodating
Right,
patrons.
and the council did not direct any changes
No, we
for
did
the
not.
permit for
No.
the Cosmic Cafe. Again, the idea was that they can apply for a permit for several nights if they need to, or whatever. When they have those nights, they can do that.
And that can be done at administrative
Administratively,
level
yes.
rather than putting it to the ordinance.
Correct.
Great, and that gives you
Correct.
some flexibility on it.
Right.
Okay, great.
However, I guess I need to call Sue in to come into my office. I did make a mistake on the one before at Main Street, at 525 Main
525,
Street.
it's still in the green zone.
I read it wrong, as at the beginning of that section it says there shall be no parking in these areas. But next to under Main Street it says there shall be limited parking in these areas. So it's confusing that way, and that's why I thought simply eliminating this made it no parking. It actually still is just listed as limited parking, but now it just says, it doesn't say what the limited parking is. So that creates a problem for us. We have 2 options. We could simply remove that and leave it as 12-minute parking for now and come back at a later date, or else you will not be able to make these changes tonight. So
Did you have a comment?
My
John?
suggestion would be to remove that change, leave it as is with the 12-minute green zone. And then I think there's going to be some other things that will be coming forward and get cleaned up at a later date.
Okay.
But it's your prerogative. If you want to postpone and we can go back and do another reading and go through this with everything else again, you can do that.
Okay. All right, is there council member comments or questions?
Let me comment on, if I could.
Vice Mayor Acuna.
Thank you. I had 2 cul-de-sacs that needed to be included in the list that I did not get in a timely manner to this process. And so they were not included because they had not had the proper notification to the public. I also had a request for a 4-hour parking on, I think it was in New Jersey? I was going to.
no, it's
By Duffy Park.
Arizona.
Below Cottonwood. Arizona. Currently, without police department intervention, it gets used as a 2nd and 3rd vehicle storage lot, and so people have no access to the park. And unfortunately, staff had dropped that one. Again, I didn't catch that they dropped it, and so that got thrown out also. So I've got those 3 pending. Those aren't that big a deal. Getting rid of, they're a big deal, but this congestion down here is 7 days a week. Has nothing to do with Clay Street. I don't know where that nonsense came from. But I would not like to see it have to wait for who knows when. I would estimate it'd be 6 months before we could.
Do I hear a motion?
No, well, I would like to correct it. And Sue has found some more things that, obviously didn't get taken care of. And if we're going to do also an idea, if Cosmic needs an event permit to use that particular lot, wouldn't that also be? We'd want to make sure that any other business in the area would know, not just Cosmic. What if Sweetie Pie suddenly had some festivity they were doing at night? They don't now, but Things are constantly changing.
Well, if it was handled at administrative
Yeah,
level, that
and
would
so
be
we
up
would
them.
want to have that wording such that it would be clear that the city manager would have the opportunity or the authorization to issue event permits as businesses requested them for that lot.
Councilman?
Wouldn't that kind of be true of any lot?
Oh,
in
yeah,
town? I mean,
absolutely.
So you wouldn't want it to be specifically for
No,
a
so
lot, but a process that could be used. in
maybe
any
that
lot?
wording needs to be,
Because who knows,
another
maybe,
item.
yes, maybe some other business would want to use a lot and get a permit, and
We'll have
you'd
Sue
want to
check
handle
the
it
wording.
administratively. I have a question.
Absolutely.
Who owns the district attorney's
Oh,
office?
yeah. Who owns that?
Who owns that building?
The county.
The
owns
county.
The county owns that building. So we cannot give away county parking, correct?
Correct.
We could talk to them about it, though. And we have a two-by-two meeting coming up, don't we?
Yeah. It's a
We
good
will
idea.
talk to
It's a
them
good idea.
about parking at the district attorney's office, but it should be known that the county controls that building and its adjacent parking lot. So to the degree that we can chat with them and maybe get them to come and let us use their parking at some point in the future, we will begin that process. Anyway.
Thank you.
So I'll throw it under the bus. I'll make a motion to send this back to staff with the corrections as noted this evening and adding the no parking on Arizona, or the 4-hour parking on Arizona Way and the 2 no parking zones in the cul-de-sacs.
Do we have enough information for staff to do that? Or
Oh, they had it before.
I am also inclined to.
Well, that would also include getting the green zone out of 525 Main Street, correct?
So that is a motion, Mark?
Yes,
Okay.
that would be my
Second.
motion.
That is motion and second. Any further discussion? I would tend to want to finish it tonight and then have it a work in progress and bring it back at a later date. But if it's a consensus of the council to,
You know,
this is a work in progress.
We've been doing this for a while.
I was going to say, let's just
Do it right and get it done.
Yes.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Noes? All right, motion carries. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We now move on to public hearings. 11.1, request that the City Council take the following actions. Number 1, to adopt a resolution approving the 2017 water rate study and approving the bi-monthly water rate and drought water rates recommended by Bartle Wells, and approve the pass-through of any wholesale water rate increase from EID to the city's water rates as allowed under government code. And then the second part, to adopt a resolution approving the 2017 wastewater rate study, approving the bi-monthly wastewater rates, and approving the elimination of the sewer discount program effective February 16th, 2018. This is not an item we love to hear, but we appreciate all your hard work on this. So, Mr. Warren.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So this is your third meeting to discuss the water sewer rates. And tonight, we're going to talk about the city's efforts in reaching out to the community, educating them, and passing along the information. We'll also talk about the actual rates we're proposing tonight. We'll talk about the Proposition 218 procedures, including the notices, the letters we've received of protest, and next steps, and we'll also do a Q&A to answer any questions folks may have. So the big question is, why new rates? We must establish rates that cover the actual cost of operating and maintaining the sewer and water systems over the next 5 years. The city has not raised its rates since 2014, and you're currently not covering your costs. And we don't anticipate covering our costs over the next 5 years. The community outreach, the city has tried really hard to convey this information. The Measure H, Measure L Sales Tax Committee discussed the sewer charge discount program and whether or not we should continue that program at its meeting on April 13th of last year. On July 27th of last year, the committee also discussed the proposed sewer and water rates and the sewer charge discount program again. On August 22nd, the rate study study itself was updated. The council was updated on the study and the assumptions included in that study. On September 10th of last year, we issued a public notice that went into the utility bills. It was on Facebook, the city's website, that talked about the workshop that was held on November 8th. as well as information about the rate study. And then on October 19th of 2017, the Measure H-L committee received an update on the rate study. On November 2nd, the Measure H, Measure L committee discussed the draft sewer and water rate discount program and further discussion in what to do with the program. On November 8th, the council held its workshop, and the staff presented the study recommendations. On November 10th, the city issued a public notice that went into the utility bills, Facebook, and the city's website. On November 16th, the Measure H, Measure L Sales Tax Committee recommended discontinuing the discount program in order to avoid additional increases in sewer rates and to fund the sewer debt coverage ratio, the 20% of that coverage ratio. On November 28th, the City Council had further discussion about the proposed sewer and water rates and directed staff to issue a Proposition 218 notice to affected property owners. And in December of 2017, those notices were mailed to all affected property owners, over 4,200 property owners. And then on January 10th of this year, we issued a notice, a public notice in our utility bills, Facebook, and the website of frequently asked questions regarding the rates. On January 31st, we published a public notice about this meeting tonight, and the same notice was also published on February 7th. So a lot of notification. First thing I want to point out is the difference between operating costs and projects. So we have the day-to-day costs, personnel, supplies, chemicals, those kind of things. Those are paid for by sewer and water rates. Projects, replacing water and sewer lines, doing improvements to our plant, our wastewater treatment plant, is paid for by Measure H and Measure L sales taxes. If it wasn't for those sales taxes, the proposed rates tonight would be significantly higher. Jumping right into water rates. This is a water dollar, and so for every dollar of rate revenue we receive, 36 cents goes to personnel, 34 cents goes to supplies, 12 cents goes to overhead, 4 cents goes to services, and 15 cents goes to equipment, contingency, debt service, and other expenses. In looking at our rates and the revenue generation, we looked at the actual costs, estimated, of course, projected over the next 5 years. The first thing we did is looked at normal inflation. Everything goes up, right? Over the last 5 years, the consumer price index has increased by an average of 2.8%. So we included that for most categories. Personnel is a little unique because it is a negotiable thing. We do have unions that we have to negotiate. We haven't completed those negotiations for the next 5 years. However, we've calculated growth based on the cost of salaries, health insurance, and other benefits. So that's included. We also looked at our equipment replacement, and we're looking at leasing some equipment between actually 2020 through 2025. Those lease payments would begin in fiscal year 2021. We also looked at restoring some public works positions. One was this is a new position, but it's a position, an employee that we haven't had for a long time, the type of work that they do. It's a maintenance worker 2. It would be water distribution related, and the goal would be to get that person trained with an Operator 3 certificate, which we need in order to operate our system. The following year, so that would be an 18-19 fiscal year, in 19-20 actually converting that position to an Operator 3 position. When you do that, when you look at our ongoing costs and the unfunded needs, you can see in this graph, the top line, that green line is our expenditures. Normally you'd like to see your revenues above your expenditures, but you can see what the problem is. This is our what we call our water dilemma. Our over the next 5 years, expenditures exceed revenue, and at the bottom is the actual deficit. So right now we have a balanced budget, we had to cut in order to balance this year's budget. But you can see that the deficit over the next 5 years grows from 0 all the way up to 590,000. So it goes year 2, 150,793, year 3, 268,036, year 4, $379,562, year 4, $488,627, and year 5, $590,916. So that's the issue. Those are the costs that we need to cover with the rate increase in water. So tonight we have your consultant, Bartle Wells Associates, and Michael DeGroot is going to walk you through the proposed water rates. Michael.
Good evening, Michael. Glad to have you with us.
Good evening, Council. So I'm going to be walking through the proposed water rates as well as the bill impacts and talking about starting with your current water rates. So your current water rates here are shown bi-monthly, and all users pay for a base charge of $27.56. Then you have a usage charge based on how much the user uses every 2 months. So for 0 to 1,000 cubic feet, the first 0 to 1,000 cubic feet, the user would pay $2.94 per 100 cubic foot. For 1,001 to 2,500 cubic feet, the user would pay $3.52. And for anything over 2,500 cubic feet, the user would pay $3.81. So that's your current water rates. We took a look at your costs, and we're proposing to change the structure a little bit, going to a uniform rate per 100 cubic foot. And the reason why we're proposing to eliminate the tier rate structure is based on compliance with state law. So in 2015, there was a court decision, the San Juan Capistrano case, and the result of that decision was that your tiered water rates need to be cost justified. And when we look at your source of supply, all of your water is purchased from EID at a flat rate. So because of this, we're proposing to charge a flat rate per 100 cubic foot for all users. Now, to mitigate this impact on the low users who are paying a reduced rate currently, we're recommending dropping that base charge. So our proposed rate for February 2018 is going to be a 7.5% increase, but the base charge will drop to $20.75 for 2 months, and the volumetric charge will be $4.15. And then from there, we're proposing a 7% increase in June 2019, 5.5% in June 2020, 5% June 2021, and 4.5% for June 2022. So you've also got a lifeline rate for low-income customers, and these customers will receive a 25% discount. So they pay less under the proposed rates. So in February 2018, they'll pay $15.57 up to $19.30 in June 2022, and their volumetric rate would be $3.12 going up to $3.88 in June 2022. So what does this mean for your the bi-monthly increase? So the typical user using 1,400 cubic foot in 2 months would see a $7.81 increase for non-lifeline and a $5.77 increase for the lifeline rate. Then in June 2022, the typical user would see a $5.66 increase for 2 months for the regular user, and a $4.18 increase for lifeline, and so on. $4.73 the next year, $3.57 for lifeline, then $4.54 for regular, $3.41 for lifeline, and finally in June 2022, $4.33 and $3.21 for lifeline. So how do our proposed rates and current rates compare to the neighbors? Placerville water rates are currently on the low end at $71.04. and we're proposing going to $78.85, which will still be on the low end. And you can see EID is more at $80.24, and so on. So the next question that we looked at is what could happen during a drought. So in the case that the city, EID, or the state declare a drought, that could result in significant loss of revenue. And so the city may need drought rates to offset this lost revenue. So we're proposing drought rates, and these were calculated based on a 20% cutback. And so the rates shown here, the base charge are the same as those proposed rates we showed earlier, but the volumetric rates are slightly higher. And I want to emphasize that these are the maximum rates that the city could impose, and the city could choose a lesser rate during a drought or choose not to implement any drought rates whatsoever. But this is just kind of an insurance policy in case there's another drought that hits. And with that, I'll turn that back over to Dave.
Thank you, Michael. Let's take a look at our sewer rates. This is a sewer dollar, so every dollar of sewer rate revenue we receive, 28 cents goes to personnel, 13 cents to services, 6 cents to supplies, 5 cents for overhead, and almost half of your sewer enterprise fund budget goes to debt. So if you were to stop maintaining your sewer system, shut down the water reclamation facility, nobody flushes their toilets, we would still have to pay about half of your budget for those expenses. And there's been questions in past presentations, why do we have so much debt? Well, the city was under a cease and desist order back in 2006, and the state essentially threatened us to make certain improvements to our plant in order to meet our NPDES permit discharge requirements or pay up to $10,000 a day in fines. And so because the fines were much more than the debt service, and in the end we'd have to make those improvements anyway with increasing costs, every day we waited, those costs went up. The city did build $45 million of improvements to the plant. And by the way, there was no additional capacity, meaning that the old plant, before the improvements were made, had capacity for additional development. However, when the new improvements were constructed, it did not add any additional capacity to the plant. I know there's been some confusion about that in the past. And this is our sewer dilemma. We're actually dealing with a $960,000 deficit when you include your debt coverage. And that deficit will grow. You can see in year 2, $953,271. And then 1920, 1.2 million. That jumps up to, in 2021, 1.5 million, 1.8 million, and then just over $2 million by year 5. So it's definitely not something that we can just ignore. I want to applaud the Measure L Sales Tax Committee. They worked very hard and considered their options in looking at ways of minimizing the rate increases. One thing they did was recommending the $1 million we get, a little over $1 million of Measure 8 sales tax, taking a little over half of that and using it for 20 percentage points of your 120% debt coverage. And what that means is we have to demonstrate that we have 120% revenue, or revenue equal to 120% of our annual principal and interest payments for debt coverage to meet our debt covenants for our bonds. And so what they recommended doing is to utilize Measure H for the 20% coverage and then use that money for sewer improvements, which is something we can do as well with that money. This avoids a 9.89% sewer rate increase. The other thing they looked at was to eliminate the sewer charge discount. A discount dollar is the same as a sewer rate increase dollar. And so by eliminating the discount, you're avoiding a 9.3% sewer rate increase. And you ask yourself, well, you know, either way, it's a rate increase, right? Well, it feels like a rate increase, but someday, after 5 years, the city's going to have to raise rates again. Everything goes up again. Groceries go up, gas goes up, everything goes up. So when the next rate increase, the next study's done, that basis for the future rate increase will actually be smaller because you're using the discount dollars to avoid increases today. So, and that assumption of eliminating the discount was included as an assumption in the Proposition 218 notices that went out to the ratepayers. And now I'll hand it over to Michael to talk about the proposed sewer rates.
Thank you, Dave. So once again, I'll go over the current and proposed rates and the bill impacts. So for sewer, you have a base charge for single-family residential of $162.11 for 2 months, and then the user pays per 100 cubic foot over the first 750 cubic foot of winter water use, which is calculated based on December and February from the prior year. So your current rate per 100 cubic foot over 750 cubic foot is $7.51. And similar to water, there's a 25% lifeline discount. So the lifeline user pays $121.58 and a volumetric rate of $5.63. And then on top of that, there's currently a $15 discount for all users. So the proposed sewer rates increase is 5.75% in February 2018, 7.25% in June 2019, 4.5% in June 2020, 4% in June 2021, and 3% in June 2022. And along with that, we're proposing to eliminate that $15 per 2 month discount starting in February 2018. So what would this mean for the average single-family residential user? So the average user using 1,050 cubic foot during the winter would see an initial increase of $25.62 in February 2018 for 2 months. Then $14.16 in June 2019, $9.42 in June 2020, $8.75 in June 2021, and $6.83 in June 2022. For Lifeline, they would see an initial increase in February 2018 of $22.96, a $10.62 increase in June 2019, $7.07 in June 2020, $6.56 in June 2021, and $5.12 in June 2022. And again, that's for 2 months. So how does this compare with the other regional agencies? Currently, Placerville is up there at 169.64, and it's in the middle high range and will remain in the middle high range at 195.25. And one thing I'd like to point out on this slide is that many of these regional neighboring agencies have other miscellaneous sources of revenue like property taxes, connection fees, surcharges, etc., that are maybe helping reduce their rate. So it's never an apples to apples comparison. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Dave.
Thanks, Michael. So there was 2 items I failed to mention in the cost components of the sewer rates. And one was the restoration of a senior maintenance worker. And that senior maintenance worker would provide additional flushing of the sewer system, which we're behind on. It would shore up our fats, oils, and greases program to reduce the chance of backups, as well as a root foaming program, which I don't believe we've ever had comprehensively. So that's something that is included. It also would add a maintenance worker, or excuse me, a water reclamation facility operator for the WRF, which we need in order to meet our permit requirements. So, but the question is, what would happen if the rates are not increased? It would result in experience of growing a number of sewer backups and damage to private property. The primary reason that's a senior maintenance worker that we included in the rates is key to avoiding future backups. You may recall last year we had 3 sewer backups. Each of those for the city was hovering around the $50,000 mark. And that's money just wasted, quite frankly. It just goes out. I mean, obviously, we need to remedy the damage, but it doesn't put pipe in the ground. So enough said. Services would have to be cut. What we mean by that is if we don't raise rates, it would result in delayed response time. We would look at everything before making any decisions, but we would ask the council to look at everything, all services, all expenses, but in the end, it really comes down to the level of service, and it could result in delayed response time for voluntary water shutoffs, leak checks, repairs of water leaks on the sewer city's side, and response time to sewer backups. So the other thing I'd like to mention is the city's efforts in minimizing these increases, and one is the sewer plant solar project. We're looking at installing solar at the plant. There's a loan we're looking at with 50% forgiveness that could save the city approximately, it's an estimate, but approximately $3 million over the life of the solar project. We're also doing a zinc study at the WRF that Mr. Rivas has estimated it could save us approximately $50,000 a year if, there's no guarantee of that, but potentially if we're successful in that study and the results of that study, it could save approximately $50,000 a year in operating costs. And every year we're looking at everything through our budget process, so we're committed to doing that, regardless if these rates are adopted tonight, of continually looking at those costs. And two other things. One, if the rates are not adopted, it would increase the exposure to state fines. If we're not maintaining our system the way we're supposed to, we're more susceptible to state fines. It could cause the city to default on its sewer treatment plant loan payments. As you saw, the Sewer Enterprise Fund has a pretty large deficit, and by the end of this year, we will have exhausted our reserves, and it could result in a default. So the Proposition 218 notice, as our procedures, we did mail those notices to all property owners. There were 4,231 parcels that were sent notices. We did receive 28 letters of protest as of this afternoon. The city is accepting protest letters up to the close of this public hearing that we're in right now. So again, we have 28. Regina, have we received any additional? We now have 32 protests, which is well below the protest, the 51%. So correct me if I'm wrong, City Attorney, but if the council chose to adopt the rates tonight, they can do that without being in violation of Proposition 218.
That's excuse me. That's correct, provided the requisite number of protests are not received.
Thank you. So tonight we are asking the council to adopt the rates as presented. We do plan on issuing notices to all ratepayers regarding the new rates and additional information in the March bill as well as the May bill. The rates would become effective the May bill of this year. Finance staff would implement those rates between April and May, and then again the first bill would go out, the May bill. The new rates would be affecting the May bill of 2018. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Dave. Does any council member questions for staff?
I have a clarifying question. I have a couple of things, but clarifying question. Michael said that if we were to take the action that was proposed, it is proposed, the $15 discount, the rate support, would go away this month?
No, the sewer charge discount would be discontinued effective February 16th of this year.
Okay, so Thursday.
So then
Friday.
The first bill where the ratepayer would see that the discount's gone would be the May bill. Okay. So the March bill will still have the discount.
Oh, I see. Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
All right, I get
Okay.
it. Also, oh, wait, there was one other thing. And this isn't really a question for staff, it's an observation. The rates that are being shown here are the maximum amount that could be charged. We could not go past that. It's possible, who knows what, if costs are mitigated and they're not as high as we anticipate, that the rates would be raised. If they were raised in any given year, it would be less than that. But that is the maximum number. And I would suggest everyone take a little history, a lesson from history. Rates were passed back in 2010?
2009.
2009, and I don't believe were ever implemented to their maximum, even close.
Not the water rates.
Not the water rates, okay.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Borelli.
I believe one thing, I'm not sure that people understood, Michael, when you were talking about how we compared to other agencies, and you said how that there were augmented by other means, and you mentioned property taxes, but I was under the understanding that a lot of they have special water districts that really kind of take care of this augmentation rather than, or is it, and you said property taxes, so is it a special charge that's included in their property taxes? And an assessment, and we don't have that. So I just, you kind of, went over it quickly, and I heard you say property taxes, and I'm thinking, oh, people are going to say we pay property taxes. So I kind of wanted you to explain, a little bit further what you were talking about.
Right. So for your neighboring agencies, some of them are districts, some of them are cities, and with each agency, there's a different mix of miscellaneous revenues that they may have available. For example, connection fees, property taxes, maybe they have.
Now, don't we have connection fees?
Right.
So, but that's, I just am pointing that out because folks are going to, lop onto that and say, oh, we have connection fees and et cetera. So,
right.
If I may, I'm sorry. Yeah. If I may, some of these districts have significant development going on. The city of Placerville, for the most part, is fully built out. We do receive, the last 3 years have been really good, but development is slowing down. We don't anticipate major development, and talking to our development services department, over the next 5 years. So we can't count on that connection revenue because we don't think there's going to be much coming in, quite frankly.
And Dave, I'm sorry, let me piggyback on that. What percentage of property tax do we retain for the city? Because I know it goes to fund our fire district, the fire district, and other agencies.
We receive approximately a little over $300,000, and that's goes into your general fund for police services and other services. Your water fund and sewer fund do not receive any property tax.
Right.
Okay, and that's an important distinction.
It's very
Yeah.
important. That's why I really wanted to
question.
make that clear, that we aren't getting any additional monies from anybody towards this, so.
And although this is somewhat off topic, it should be noted that that $300,000 is about 4.8, it's slightly less than 5% of all the property tax that's collected in the city. So when you pay $1 of property tax, only thank you, because I was trying to do math, about 4.5 cents comes to the city. Now it goes to worthy things like schools and your fire department and the county and certain services the county does that we don't do. But we don't receive much property tax. So that's a kind of just an add-on.
Okay. And before I open the public hearing, I'd like to assure everyone that we don't like being here. We know you don't like it either, and we don't like it either. But there's some harsh realities that we have to face in order to provide appropriate governance for the city. I would also like to highlight that it's important to note that in compensation for the reduction of the tiered structure going to the flat rate, the base rate was reduced 30%. And I think that's important. Numbers are sometimes misleading. It went down from 27 to 20 and some odd change. But that's a reduction at the base rate of 30%. So those of you folks who are diligent about conserving, it's very probable that your bills will go down. In fact, I think you said your bill went down.
I did a back of the envelope calculation, and in fact, on the water side, the sewer side's going to go up, but on the water side, our bill will go down about $2.
So that's important to note. Yeah.
Hey.
That's right. That's important to note, that you won't be penalized if you conserve water. You will actually benefit from this. The other thing I would like to highlight is Measure H&L was just a really important addition to our community. And in going through the numbers, if you do the math, the $548,501 of transfer from Measure H fund to the sewer fund to have the necessary money we needed in there for the debt coverage compliance. If we didn't have Measure H&L to do that, in addition to the rates proposed tonight, we would be proposing an additional 9% increase. If it weren't for Measure H&L, the $50,000 that we have for our deferred maintenance to our water and sewer pipes that are in critical need of repairs, if we didn't have Measure H&L to cover those capital projects, we would, in addition to the 9%, also be looking at an 18% increase on top of that. So thank you, Measure H&L. It's making a huge difference in helping us, control our rates and to repair the critical needs to our water and sewer system. So just really wanted to highlight that. So that's. Did you have something else, Dad? No. All right. So with that, I'd like to open the public hearing on this item and look forward to hearing your comments. Please come forward and state your name for the record. And the speakers are limited to 3 minutes. So come on down. Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Edward Morales. I live in the Hillcrest subdivision. And I don't think it's appropriate governance. By the way, I want to say that I respect you all, and I appreciate your information, Dave Warren, about they basically raised your taxes without asking you. 4,000 residences you guys knew would not show up here or would not write a letter. So then automatically the tax rate goes up. It's not, I believe it's not even constitutional to raise a rate on a citizen without the asking of the citizen. This almost compares to the Stamp Act when the England made the American colonists pay a tax for stamps transporting goods. So I think it's wrong. I think the method of you raising the tax is wrong. I see that the need of the tax is appropriate, but the methodology that you use, that if you don't show up, if you don't make a stink, or if you don't write a letter, the tax is going through. To me, it should have been the reverse. You should have gotten an affirmative vote from the citizens of Placerville and then increased it. If you knew that you weren't going to get it, that's why you did it this way. So they just raised your rate without asking you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morales.
I'm standing up because my legs get stiffer. Kirk Smith of Placerville. Well, I regularly think there's another reason, because I didn't write a protest letter because I knew it wasn't going to do any good. Either way, we're screwed. And here's why. Just look. I mean, it is. Look at what you've offered, the party line I've heard for 10 years. Why do we have so much debt? Primarily due to $45 million in state-mandated improvements to the sewer treatment plant. I've heard that for a long time. But where is it in the legislation that said the city of Placerville had to spend $45 million? Where was it in that legislation that said the city of Placerville had to expand a plant so large that it would provide for a capacity that's 4 times larger than what we have now? It says that we have a mandate from 2006 that we had to do this, a cease and desist order. But there's nothing in that order that said we had to build a very large plant. And I've heard that for a long time, that it's not us, it's the mean old state, because they created these unfunded liabilities. They required us to improve the water system the quality of water, but didn't give us the money. But again, they didn't require that plant to be so enormous. Who's going to be paying for it down the road? We're paying for it now, but how many generations in the future? How many decades? Does anybody know? When we hear this discussion about the interest rates, that's good. But I think we all knew in 2006 and thereabouts that there was this thing called inflation. And just as you could calculate debt services, you could at that time calculate the consumer price index. And actually, I think it's the GPN deflator that's more popularly used among economists because it's more reliable than a bag of groceries. But I don't see anything, unless you can correct me if I'm wrong, the city had a cease and desist order that said you had to build a plant that's 4 times larger. I learned that off the street for a long time, but it was discussed here last month. A council member asked.
We'll get that corrected for you.
Beg your pardon?
We'll get that information corrected for you.
Because it does run a problem when we're told this, if it's not, and I realize that just mathematically, if it's 4 times greater and you reduced it to the current needs, that wouldn't necessarily mean that the total bill for building a plant would have been 1/4 of the cost. But it just seems like in the business world, you build just beyond your needs rather than project way off into the future. And have us now, I know I pay thousands of dollars every cycle for what's going to be the needs for folks in the future. And I think I would have felt a lot more comfortable if somebody, when they're talking about this unfunded liability thing, had explained why are we making it so enormously large, the capacity. Thank you.
Well, great. Actually, all right. We will get that misinformation corrected as soon as we close public comment, close the public hearing. Would anyone else like to speak on this? Good evening.
Good evening. Sue Rodman, member of your Measure H, Measure L committee. One of the things that Kurt brought up was a misinformation that the plant is larger, and yet right here in our handout it says no additional capacity was added to the plant. So maybe we can clear that one up right now. And it was a 30-year loan. So in 30 years we should have this thing paid off. I think it needs to be explained that water is a commodity, and rate charges are for water consumption. And these are fees, not taxes. They are a fee, a rate for a consumption, a consumed commodity that we have the privilege to have piped to our homes. And water treatment is sewer water treatment is a service that the city provides based on the sewer flow rate and type. So they're really very different, although water consumption does generate sewer flow. What goes in the pipe comes out the pipe, unless it goes on the lawn. I am not protesting the proposed rate increases or the elimination of the sewer discounts. I think both are absolutely needed to bring Placerville's water delivery and sewer treatment up to the mandated standards. However, I would encourage the Finance Department and the City Council to evaluate in the city's yearly budget process if each increase is justified and keep those increases as low as possible. Your ratepayers will appreciate you and your efforts to help us. I would like to ask one clarification question. I think that this is true, but I'd like to ask, do the rate increases keep both water and sewer funds solvent? These rate increases should solve the deficit. I hope this is true. Is it? And do these provide the services that we are lacking now? I hope they do, because my impression is that that is the reason for the rate increase.
Great. We'll get that answered. Great. Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak on this?
Good evening, City Council.
Good evening.
I don't envy you for this position. I know you have to do this. You have to legally charge what it costs to deliver the service. So I'm just hoping going forward, you're going to keep the costs at a bare minimum. The report of what CalPERS is going to do to local jurisdictions going forward is insane. It's basically going to double what this jurisdiction might be paying. So heads up, California. Flee. So yeah, I know you have to do this, make it as painless as possible going forward. My comment in the past about the sewer discount, getting rid of that, was hopefully in lieu of Measure L. It wasn't with Measure L's new sales tax, with increased rates. So if anyone thinks that I was supporting that and all of this, no. Just an FYI, the Prop 218 notice was not on the city's website under public notices. It was under home news page. The mailed notice did not mention that legally a tenant responsible for paying the bill can legally file a rate protest. Just a small thing there. Per Director Rivas at a meeting not too long ago stated that the sewer plant was built to general plan build-out numbers. So it was overbuilt to accommodate for that future growth. But if you measure it with the I&I storm surge that we had a year ago, it is not overbuilt. So, but as soon as you can fix those leaks, then we can start. And that's an interesting thing too. If somebody came in and wanted to add 500 houses to this city, could you really do it? Because our plant overflowed. So you probably technically couldn't add that many houses. And then another good question is, how will you fund the lifeline rates? Because state law does not allow ratepayer funds to pay for a discount. So I've never heard a mention of where will those funds come from to pay for that discount. And then this is just a question. Is the answer to lower all of our rates going forward to start annexing and increase the size of the pie so there's more slices in it? I don't know. That's just a question, food for thought.
Thank you, Michael. Good food for thought. Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll close the public hearing, and let's get staff to answer some questions. Did you have a question first?
I have a couple of questions for staff, and actually it does speak to this issue of the capacity of the plant. And Mike is correct. The plant is built for general plan build out, which is a number around 21,000. We'll round it up. It's actually a little less than that. That's the estimate. It could go here or there, but that's the general plan build out. So we, once again, I did a kind of little back of the envelope estimate given current growth rates for the city. It would be build out for the city at the current rates would be somewhere in the vicinity of about 15 years to 20 years before we would be completely built out. The current estimated population of the city is around 10,700 or thereabouts. But the general plan was in place, and that plant had been sized prior to these improvements. So we need to be clear. There was nothing that happened with the existing plant and the improvements that increased the capacity to accommodate some sort of other growth beyond that which we had already done in the general plan. And I think the general plan was last looked at, what, in the 90s, I'm thinking? Yeah. And that's really important. As Mayor Thomas says, nobody wants to be here. Nobody wants to do this. We have to pay our bills. We have to make the system solvent. And this is going to be difficult. We will be, as we have been running the city. One thing you should know, this city council and previous city councils, we run the city effectively with 27% less money than we did almost 10 years ago, because that's how much revenue the city lost in 1 year. And only in this last budget year did we get back to the real numbers for revenue for the entire city budget. So this has always been a very thrifty city. We split dimes very closely. And if we can, in fact, not raise rates to their maximum, whether I'm sitting in this chair or somebody else, that's what's going to happen, because the city has a demonstrated history of this. But we really need to be clear. These plan improvements that were done 7-8 years ago now did not increase the capacity of the plant to meet some sort of growth thing, and general plan build-out is not 4 times anything. General plan build-out is roughly now almost doubling the size of the current city. And my guess is it's going to be much longer than 15 or 20 years before that happens. It'll probably be way out in the future. So those are important things. Now, someone may walk up and down Main Street and tell you that it's going to be 4 times, but you can now stop them and say, I'm sorry, that's not true.
Right. Thank you for that important clarification. Appreciate it. Let's get some other questions answered. This is for City Attorney Driscoll. How was our methodology created, and was proper notice made on this public hearing?
Yeah, we're mandated by state to do exactly what we did.
Okay.
When you're dealing with water and sewer rates, the state in Proposition 218 has a procedure, which is a protest procedure. It's not one where you send out ballots, but it's a protest procedure, and that's what the state tells us we have to do, and that's what we did.
So we don't have the discretion to come up with our own methodology?
No, not really.
Okay, all right. Well, that's a good question, though. Yeah.
But
Yes,
I think we should address, though, what was explained to us in one of the slides. We had 3 pages of what we've done to notify the public.
Yeah, there were 11 discussions on this, between council discussions and workshops, and
Right.
so it was
We called it community outreach.
Exactly.
And it
we've
was pointed out that we did due diligence in
to get the notice out to
Right.
this. Let's see, other questions? Let's see. Do rate increases keep the Water and Sewer Fund Enterprises Fund solvent? Dave, that's a really good question.
That's a very good question, and the answer is, based on our analysis, yes, these rates, if our assumptions hold true, these rates will cover the cost of service.
Okay.
There are things that can happen. I'm not going to lead you down the path that thinking that this, you do this and there's no problems. There's nothing, everything's going to come out the way we estimated. Your NPDES permit is a 5-year permit for your sewer water reclamation facility, and we have to negotiate that permit. And every time we negotiate, the state wants us to do more. They want us to purify our discharge even more, do more things, take more things out of the sewer. So we have no control over that other than negotiations. If the state came down on the city hard with new regulations, that could have effect to your sewer enterprise fund. But for what we know right now, we feel this will cover the cost. The other thing that was mentioned, pensions. We did address within the rates what we believe the impact is, but again, we're going by information from CalPERS. If we are sued for something, a backup, or that can have effect to your funds as well. So just to give you a feel, but we feel these rates do cover the other piece. The water consumption in which we estimated our revenues was very conservative. We're coming out of a drought, at least I think we are. And
we were.
Don't know about now, though.
We're not anymore.
We haven't quite recovered from 2013 from consumption is going up. If consumption continues to increase, that'll help your fund. And there was Sue Rodman's request to have the council evaluate each year whether or not we need to raise rates according to the structure, the proposed schedule. We are committed to looking at that, and if we have a good year or it looks like, water consumption's going up, we may have some development, maybe annex some land, things that can offset the rates. We're committed to making recommendations to the council to offset those increases.
And this council is also committed to being as prudent with the taxpayer dollars as we possibly can. Absolutely.
What if we're awarded, you were saying that we've applied for
Solar?
And we're awarded that, and then also Pierre's, the zinc.
The zinc study, potentially, if the outcome of the study results are positive, it potentially could save us around $50,000 a year,
Right,
$50,000 a year. And then the solar could generate approximately $3 million over a 25-year period, is that right, Cleve? So again, that could
So all that would be
create
applied to-
savings to avoid future rate increases.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion?
I
Yes.
had a couple of follow-up questions, if I might, Madam Mayor. Michael Drubish brought up commented that a tenant, in his understanding of the 218 process, that a tenant can file a protest. Mr. Driscoll, what was your comment on that?
Councilmember Acuna, if I might just add something to my previous answer,
Okay.
and then I'll answer your question.
Sure.
I should have pointed out also that under 218, there's alternate procedures for assessments. And that's where you actually do a ballot procedure, because those are considered taxes. And somebody made the comment that these are really fee for service, fee for commodity. Because of that distinction, 218 has a protest procedure for rates like water and sewer, where they have a different procedure where you're going to put an assessment on somebody's property that shows up in their tax bill. Now, with respect to, excuse me, with respect to Councilmember Acuna's question, no, tenants are not required under 218 to be allowed to have a protest vote. However, some jurisdictions do allow tenants to vote. You have sometimes situations where you have a property owner and you have a tenant. They may be of the same position and they may not be. Do you let them both protest? Do you not? Some jurisdictions have provided rules where they allow certain tenants to to vote, to do a protest vote, where others do not. But 218 strictly, if you read it as it's written, does not require anybody but the property owner to have the protest vote.
Thank you. The other question was the funding source for the lifeline rate.
Oh, yeah.
Where is it? What is the intent to do that, Dave? Because I clearly understood the comment from the audience.
Dave, you want me to answer that?
Yes, please.
Okay. It's an interesting issue. Theoretically, any lifeline rates should not be paid from, the subsidy should not be paid from rates, but should come from other sources.
Could you explain how I just want to
And
piggyback on.
well, for example, if somebody doesn't pay their bill on time and they have to pay interest because it's delinquent and an interest penalty is assessed, that interest money could be used to subsidize the lifeline rates or other sources
And
the
could
city
you,
might have.
could you tell the public how a lifeline rate is ascertained?
I'd defer that to Dave
Okay.
because he can
Sure.
set the criteria for that.
Sure, yeah, the city has a program where if the ratepayer qualifies for PG&E Care program, and they bring their bill into City Hall, and we will provide them that discount. Or if they qualify for the AT&T Lifeline program, which that population's shrinking because they only do landlines.
Landline.
Most people are cell phones, which they don't have a Lifeline program for cell phones to my knowledge. So the other
So
fee.
PG&E is pretty much the,
That's pretty much the mainstay, if you will. The other thing we're looking at, late fees can also, that revenue can be applied towards Lifeline, is my understanding, and any other non-rate revenue. So we are looking at that. We plan on evaluating it and bringing recommendations back to the council at a future date.
So my example would have been if we just, let's call him ratepayer number one, was eligible for the lifeline rate and his bill was reduced by $20 a month compared to ratepayer number two's bill. Where's that $20 coming from? Who is providing that subsidy?
It's a mix, but primarily from rate revenue.
From where, Dave?
Primarily from rate revenue.
Rate
So if
revenue.
if it's a water bill, from water rates primarily. If it's sewer, from sewer rate revenue, primarily right now.
Okay, and I had one other clarification for Dave. Mr. Driscoll won't be able to interrupt you. Goes back to something you said during your presentation, and that was last year we had 3 sewer spills, and they were, I wanted to clarify, it was $50,000 for each spill.
Approximately, yes.
So that, for an example, was more than enough money to fund a full-time position.
Yes, and I'd like to point out that that's our deductible.
I was just going to
Some of
ask
these
you.
claims were over 50,000, but that's shared within our insurance, Joint Powers
insurance,
Authority. But in the end, it affects our future premiums.
Yes.
So but just simple math I was trying to demonstrate. You're right. It easily could fund actually over one position,
And then
possibly a position and a half.
Another side effect I would assume is each one of those is, of course, has to be reported to the state, which then can increase its oversight of our system if it starts to see red flags that Placerville is having an excessive number of spills and having to have cleanups and what have you, private property damage. Doesn't that put our district, our operating system, at further risk for scrutiny?
That's my understanding. I would defer to Mr. Yule or Mr. Rivas, or perhaps Ms. Neves on that.
Most definitely.
Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion or questions?
Just keeps adding up and adding up.
With that, I'd like to break this item down into two motions so we adopt each of the rates separately. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move the water rates as provided in the staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay. All right, with that, may we have the roll call vote, please?
Vice Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Mayor Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Clarici?
Aye.
That's item 1. Item 2, I entertain a motion.
So moved.
I will second that. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Mayor Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Clarici?
Aye.
All right,
Madam Mayor, could we have a moment for comments
absolutely.
on the action? Just making notes. First of all, I want to thank the speakers. I took copious notes on your comments, and they were very appropriate. Even Kirk's comment about either way. Yes, there's no way out of this bad position. And I'll preface it by saying that think of it as we live in an old house. We live in a very old house. You could try and point blame 10 years back. You can point blame back 100 years. There's plenty of opportunities that the rates were not adjusted, projects were postponed, and it's an expensive town to operate. So I guess it's having restored a couple old buildings. I know that you have that joy of everything is out of plumb, everything isn't square. Every time you touch something, you find more dry rot. I kind of don't like to think of our pipe systems that way, but they're old and they're very tired. They've been in the ground long beyond anybody's anticipated service range. In fact, they're probably worthy of a scientific study, how some of this stuff still functions. It's that old. And so the price of living in an old house is still the importance of maintaining a safe public water system, because that's what we're talking about. This isn't a luxury, I can water my lawn a little extra on Tuesdays. This is maintaining the public safety for every person that lives and visits this town. Same thing with the proper handling of the wastewater. Yes, we might not like it. Kirk complained about trying to blame the state. In reality, it is state and federal regulations. If you want to spend the time, you will find that there were needs for these. We will not escape that oversight. And I doubt that those dollars will ever come from Sacramento or Washington to help us maintain what we're being required to maintain. You have to remember that the wastewater treatment plant, which did take an absolute beating last winter and did overflow and was subject to state oversight, discharges practically drinkable water into Hangtown Creek. In the summer, the environment downstream from our wastewater treatment plant is absolutely beautiful because that water is that clean. And I take a great deal of pride in having a staff and department heads that take responsibility in making sure that we are in compliance and we are sending our discharge as appropriate as we're supposed to. This whole issue about the plant, I think you have to remember that back in the 90s or the 80s, I think that was plant number 2 or 3, the one that was replaced in the 2000s. Those councils and those city staffers had a responsibility to size that plant so that they were spending dollars wisely. They didn't try to build a 10-quart plant when they needed a 50-gallon plant. They had to look forward. We had to look forward. And I appreciate Councilmember Clarici's accurate depiction of what really goes on. And it is the 1990 general plan, the 20,000 population. We're getting close to 11,000. So we've got about 8 to 10 years, technically, before we'll reach build-out. The plant will handle that. the plant will not handle 30 or 40,000. It's not going, it was never done. So, please realize that there's an awful lot of responsibilities that go with this. And I would just like to let everyone know that I don't personally take this lightly. I'm not happy with my bill going up significantly, but we have an obligation to make sure that we are operating a system that is in compliance, that we are not spilling sewer or leaking water onto other people's property. And I'll end with this. It's unfortunate that the folks that accused us of unconstitutional action this evening have chosen to use their constitutional right to leave the meeting about 15 or 20 minutes ago. So they didn't hear the motion, they won't hear my comments, so they will go out and make whatever assumptions they will make, and that always frustrates me, to come before a committee or a commission, a council, and make those kinds of accusations and that were not true, but then to decide that they give up their fight and they leave. I wish they'd have stayed for the end. So thank you, Madam Mayor, for allowing me to make those comments.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor Acuna. Appreciate it. And I'd also like to recognize staff and Bartle Wells. Staff, you did a Herculean job. I know you wrestled with every dime and in doing this, and you didn't take it lightly. And really appreciate everyone's efforts on this really difficult task, but making sure that what we charge our consumer represents the cost of what it costs us to maintain our healthy water and sewer systems. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mayor. It was a team effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Just as a point of order, a housekeeping thing, at the close of the public hearing, we should ask the city clerk again to declare how many protests were
Thank you.
received to make this in the record.
I do apologize about
Should
that.
that be
Yes, how many protest letters did we receive?
In total, Madam Mayor, we have received 32.
32. Does any further action need to
Do
be
we need
taken
to
on that?
make,
All right. Well, thank you all.
32.
As a historical note, when people get really angry, was about 400 or 500 protest letters came when we did this?
In, let's see, 2009, I want to say there was a couple hundred, was there?
I think it
300?
was just under 500.
Was it that many? Yeah.
Oh, I didn't think it was that many. I thought it was
It
about 200.
might have been in the 400 range.
Yeah.
But yeah, 300 or 400.
What would have been required for this?
Approximately 2,100.
2,100?
All right. All right. With that, we will move on to our next public hearing, item 11.2, and that is the approval of General Plan Amendment 17-1, zone change and environmental assessment for 260 Wilsey Road, and take the following actions. To number 1, adopt the neg deck for the request. Number 2, adopt a resolution amending the general plan land use map from low-density residential and high-density residential to rural residential for the subject parcel, and introduce the first reading of an ordinance amending the zoning map from R1, that's $20,000 single-family residential zone, airport overlay, and R3, medium-density multifamily residential zone, airport overlay, to estate residential for the subject property. And who would like to talk about this side? Mr. Rivas?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The project location comprises 128 acres. It's currently known, or has been known as, the Lumsden Ranch property. It's at the southerly end of Wilsey Road, adjacent to the city's Lumsden Park, south of Barrett Drive, and east of the Eschaton Plan development. The southerly 4/5 of the site, which comprise approximately 106 acres, currently has an existing general plan designation of low-density residential, and it has a zone classification of R1 20,000 single-family residential zone. The remaining 1/5, or about 22 acres of the site, has a high-density residential land use designation and a zone classification of medium-density multifamily residential zone. The property owner is requesting to change the land use designation and zoning classification for the entire 128-acre parcel. The general plan land use designation would change from low-density residential with a density range of approximately 1 to 4 dwelling units per acre, and a high-density residential land use designation with its density range of 4 to 24 dwelling units per acre, that's the multi-family portion, to all being rural residential with a density range of 0.2 to 1 dwelling unit per acre, or basically one house per 5-acre lot. The rezone request would change the current zoning from R1 20,000, which is a single-family residential zone with a maximum density of 2.18 dwelling units per acre, and the R3 medium-density multifamily residential zone with a maximum of 12 dwelling units per acre, to estate residential that has a maximum density of 0.2 dwelling units per acre, or in other words, 1 dwelling unit per 5-acre lot. The applicant has indicated to the city that there is no physical development of the project site that is proposed. Their intent with the lower density general plan redesignation and the rezoning is to help preserve geographical features found on the site, lessen demands for city services and other agencies, and allow for development of custom homes. Staff did perform a rather involved analysis of its general plan. I'll just highlight one aspect of that analysis, and that is in regards to conformance with the city's housing element. The project site, with its existing land use designation and zone classification, is not listed in the city's inventory of land necessary to meet its RHNA, or Regional Housing Needs Allocation, under the income categories of extreme low income or very low income. This request was considered by the Planning Commission at their meeting on November 7th. And they recommended that the council on a 3-to-1 vote to, 1, adopt the negative declaration, adopt a resolution amending the general plan land use map from low density residential and high density residential to rural residential for the subject parcel, and then 3, to introduce and waive the first reading of an ordinance amending the zoning map from R1 20,000 single-family residential zone with an airport overlay, and R3, the medium-density multifamily residential zone with an airport overlay, to estate residential, to include also the airport overlay for the subject parcel. So with that, you have your staff report and all the information that was submitted from staff to the Planning Commission before you. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Thank you so much, Pierre. Does council have any questions at this time before the public hearing?
Not at this time.
Not this time? All right. So with that, I'd like to open the public hearing on this item. Actually, I'll invite the applicant to come forward if you'd like to start us off this evening. Good evening and welcome.
And council and staff, I am Mark Heckey. I'm a planning consultant that has been hired by Placerville 128 investors, who are the partnership owner of the property, to represent them and to file their entitlement applications and the rezone. So my company, Touchstone Consultants, has been in charge of preparation of the environmental assessment questionnaire, the rezone application, the general plan amendment, and basically work with staff to develop this application package. Just a little bit of history of the property might serve us well to kind of look back. Going back about 10 years ago, the current zoning, which allows for the typical R1 subdivision, approximate capacity of about 350 units, including the high density component of the property, was a subdivision that failed. You might say it might have been bad timing with the recession hitting around that time. I'm sure that was a big part of it. I think also the EIR showed very high impacts for development of the property. Those development impacts also come with a price tag for the developer and the builder, and they have to be sustained by market pricing of the homes. And basically, the subdivision became upside down financially at that time. my clients are actually investors and financiers of real estate. They are not developer builders, and they actually came into possession of this property by foreclosure on a note to the developer. It's my understanding there were a couple attempts to put development packages together 10 years ago. Neither really came together. And when you walk the property and see the terrain, the topography, the amount of trees and vegetation on the property, some of the drainage challenges, and really major road connection challenges, you can see that the feasibility of the current zoning is not very good. And what the goal of this application for the Placerville 128 Associates is really to get to a more marketable form of zoning for the property so that it could be developed in something that's more appropriate for the area, more appropriate for the constraints of the property, which is estate residential. And I do have the Placer 128 general partner here, Jim Croach. I also have the real estate agent for the property available for questions as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Heckey. Appreciate it. Would any of the additional applicants like to come forward? All right. All right. At this point, the public hearing is open for anyone that wishes to speak on this item. Hello again.
Hello. I like lower densities, so this is fine with me. I think the biggest problem you're going to find with this is Wiltsey being impacted with potential traffic. So I would like you to emphatically state in here that any future development must address that. I mean, you have other potentials. You can do one or two roads out to outer Broadway towards Airport Road. Somebody just said they did not want a road going to Country Club, but you need two roads for egress, emergency. You can have a connection to Wiltsey, but it should be an emergency only exit out of that area. You could also use, when Blair's Bridge project used Eschaton, went around the back. You have a brand new bridge and road. I don't know if Eschaton wants people coming through there, but that's the biggest impact I see. Besides more chickens and goats and almonds. And I love it. Good job.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening.
Hi, Connie Zielinski. We live right off of Wiltsey.
Can you pull the microphone down, Connie?
Okay.
Thank you.
We live right off of Wiltsey on Lane, and it has become abundantly clear that we do not have a good way of getting out if Broadway's blocked from us. You can't get out Eschaton. They've got a gate. You can't get up further. If you went towards Country Club, there's a gate. So when I saw this, I thought, well, if someone does develop it, maybe there will be a way for us to get out. Okay. So the thought that it shouldn't impact Wiltsey made me think, actually, I would like it to impact Wiltsey. I would like it to, part of anything that gets developed there, to address how to make it safely out for them. And then I'll benefit from them being able to get out Wiltsey if that's what they need to do in an emergency. And with the fires we've had throughout the state, that really does worry me. So I'm hoping that this change of zone doesn't affect one way or the other what you might do, unless it's an effect that's better in terms of people being able to move around.
All right. Thank you so much. Any other comments on this item? With that, I'll close the public hearing. All right, bring it back to the council. Vice Mayor Acuna.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That was a very quick public hearing. Cleve's been all right all night long. I have a question for either staff or the applicant. If they were to obtain the zone change on the 128 acres, what would be the next step? What would we see in our planning department from the Touchstone folks?
Just as a caveat, this is speculation, but let's just say, for example, under the existing zoning, under the existing general plan, we had the Lumpson Ranch project, which was proposing approximately 366 single-family lots based on the existing general plan and based on the existing zoning. So they had to submit a tentative map. Now, that project was proposed under a planned development, so it basically left a lot of the acreage as open space and then placed the homes in the future lots within areas of better accommodating topography. So the same thing would apply here. Should the general plan amendment and rezone move forward, then it would be up to the current property owner or future property owner to submit a subdivision application to the city to further subdivide the property, or they could just keep it as a 128 acre single parcel with a house on it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rivas. I watched the Planning Commission meeting video on YouTube, and they did a very nice job. They really struggled with this without a project, and I want to say towards the end of that, Chair Saragosa opened comments back up. There was nobody from the public that spoke. And there was mention made of a lot of concern about the ability to market this. It's a very difficult piece of property. I think we all know that, and the buyers should have known that. Nothing is going to change out there to improve the geography. So there has to be some creativity used. I want to say towards the end of that, one of the questions from the Planning Commission was, what's going to happen? They were really, because they're so used to the process of having a map, having a design in front of them, and then they have something to really get a feel for how the entire property is affected as well as the surrounding neighborhoods. The comment was made by one of the associates that they were looking at doing developing a 4-parcel map for this, because they felt that it would then make it more marketable to not have the mass of 128 acres. And that was that true, gentlemen?
Actually,
or
with that,
can staff verify that?
Let's have staff verify that. Well, we're going to have staff verify that. So.
Staff would defer to the property owner because that's...
Come on down. I will reopen public comment on that. Sorry.
Staff has no application other than the general plan amendment, the rezone, so this is very speculative. They did indicate that they were interested in doing more of a larger lot subdivision in order to sell it off and dispose of the property.
Okay. Good evening. Please state your name for the record.
I'm Jim Crutch, and I'm
the
major partner of this project. There's only 5 of us. It's not a great big company. We made a loan on this property. We were basically cheated by the person that put the loan together. We put way too much money into this, but we foreclosed. Now we're trying to make the best of it. Over the last 10 years, I've been involved, which gave me the opportunity to come up to Hangtown a number of times. I love this town, let me tell you. It's great. I personally want to spend a lot more time up here. There's going to be 4 parcels. I'm going to keep one for myself. That's what I'm going to do.
So there is going to be 4 parcels.
And the intention is 4 parcels. I'd like to keep one for myself. I want to build a home up here. I'm retired now. I've been in the Bay Area all my life. I like to change. The other 3, the intention is to sell them unless one of the other partners buys one. He has enough interest where he could acquire one too. And I don't know what his intention is, but he might. He's talked about it too. He's 60. He just survived cancer. 10% chance for survival. It's been about 5 years. He's made it, which is wonderful.
Good.
So he's able to do that also. The other 2 would probably sell, and that would help us pay for the house. So that's our plan. That's what we want to do. I love this town. I've always loved this town. I've been to come up Highway 50 for most of my life. So anyway, that's our plan for the project. We don't have any great big development plans. And just as an aside, my partner and I also own the property next door, which is next to the park, which is 250 Wiltsey, which gives us the opportunity as we go to the next stage, if we need easements or anything, we can do that too. So we kind of have this plan. It's taken 10 years to get to this point, and we just want to sell some of it. That's our plan.
All right.
So that's where we are.
Do you have a question, Councilman?
What parcel do you own next door? You
250 Wiltsey, which is a 5-acre parcel right next to the lake, the park. Right. It borders the park.
Okay.
Right. So.
Well, we're delighted you like Placerville, and
Yeah.
thank you very much
It's a
for
great
clarifying
town.
that for us. Appreciate it, Jim.
Thank
you.
So, follow-up question to staff, Madam Mayor.
Absolutely.
Pierre, what's the process for handling a parcel map? What level of approval is required?
That is typically approved at the staff level unless there's a protest, and then it moves on to the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission would consider the application, and if there's an appeal, then it would be heard by the City Council.
So there would be a possibility that there would be no public review of creating 4 parcels on this 120, out of this 128.
There would be public review, and that we would notify all adjoining property owners of the request, and then they have the opportunity then to comment on
Would
the project.
they, if they wanted to take it to a hearing, would they have to pay a fee if a neighbor filed a complaint?
No, the applicant would pay then the cost of that.
Okay. So basically, it's an ministerial approval on, so we've gone from 350 homes down to 4 parcels so 2 guys can retire.
It's what made this country great.
Yeah.
Actually, I do have a follow-up question to yours, Vice Mayor Acuna.
Sure.
So, Pierre, if the land was split into 4 parcels, a new owner comes to town, loves Placerville, but wants to split that into 4 parcels. Is that, what's the process for that? Is that the same process?
It'd be a parcel map application.
Okay, so it could keep being divided by 4. And do I understand correctly that at 5 parcels, that triggers additional requirements?
That would be a
Subdivision? Okay. Can you talk, there were some questions, and I should have gotten this answered first. I sure understand everyone's concerns about Wiltsey. That's probably one of the trickiest streets and intersections in our city, and probably one of the it has the least capacity on it. Can you explain that if a parcel map was to go forward or any improvements to that, what the process would be to look at necessary improvements on Wiltsey?
And just to answer your previous question, though, the main difference in processing between a parcel map and a tentative map, a tentative subdivision map would automatically go to the Planning Commission for final approval by the council. So that's a big difference for the level of processing of a tentative map with creating five or more parcels versus 4 or less parcels. But to answer your question, the current project will have no impact on Wiltsey. The Lumpson Ranch project was going to divert traffic through a proposed Canyon View Drive that would access to Broadway, and then it would also connect then with Barrett Drive to the south. So it would have 2 ways in and 2 ways out, and so any future subdivision would also have that requirement. A 4-parcel split would have, and again, I'm speculating, but a formal application, I can assume that's almost a de minimis impact in terms of traffic, and so we would probably allow that traffic then to use Wiltsey, because that's essentially virtually no impact traffic-wise. But anything larger, like eventual build-out of the 25 individual 5-acre lots, well, we'd have to look at the traffic analysis to determine whether or not they would be required then to also build a Canyon View Drive. Staff, that large map that's behind you in the dais there, that is the adopted city's master circulation plan. It's part of the adopted general plan. And should they come in with a parcel map, they would have to provide for at least the very minimum, the easements to provide for the full build-out as shown in the general plan and the zoning. So currently, and that was an issue that staff had originally, because they wanted to retain the original general plan and land use and just subdivide into 4 parcels. And we told them, well, you're going to have to build infrastructure commensurate with the future build-out. So with the general plan amendment and rezone, down planning and down zoning, if you will, then it's much less, but they're still going to need to provide for 2 points of access and provide for those connections per the city's general plan.
Okay. Do you have a follow-up question? Let's see, where was it? I had a bunch of notes here. Sorry about that. I do have a question, because this is a major change. A general plan amendment is a big deal. It's something that needs to be considered very carefully. And while I think we all love the concept of rural estates, and downzoning, we're all very cognizant of not extreme build out. However, we need to take a close look at this and have careful consideration, because there are some important distinctions between being a city as opposed to being a rural county. We are a city, and as we wrestled with water and sewer rates tonight, and we talked about, the way you get the cost of services down is to add additional capacity, have additional ratepayers paying on our water and water services, and whether that's through future annexations or appropriate development within our city. That's something we need to be cognizant of. So basically, the action before us tonight is to reduce the capacity by like 94%. And Pierre, can you talk a little bit about the distinctions, between having a city designation as opposed to a rural county designation in terms of water and sewer service? And I know there's no project before us today, but can you speak to that?
Sure. Typically speaking, when you're looking at 5 acres or larger, that is rural, and you're looking at an individual lot then, or a home that would be served by on-site well for water, and then on-site septic system. And that is typically what you would see more in a county rural development. But in the city, of course, as you stated, we have a very expensive wastewater treatment plant. We have city water. And so we would require any future created lots would have to be served by public water and public sewer. And so, the business, the city is in the business of providing for a high level of public services to afford landowners the ability to achieve the highest and best use, or higher densities of residential development, or higher intensities of development. I mean, that's what the city does. That's what it's in the business for. It's not in the business of rural development. That's more of a county situation. So it's a nutshell. I hope that characterizes sort of the difference here.
Yeah. And the RE zone, it talks about preserving farmland. Is this land farmable?
It's very, very steep. So the RE, or estate residential zone, allows for what I would characterize as accessory agricultural pursuits. So say if a family moves into a 5-acre lot, they can have 4-H for their kids, and they can have a horse or maybe a cow or some goats or something like that. They are allowed to have animals. They can have chickens. They can have roosters. But a lot of this land is fairly steep, and so there's only a few areas where it's more flat, where you would have large animals. So again, I think the agricultural pursuits are not commercial agricultural pursuits, but it's accessory to a residential use.
Okay. I don't have any further questions right now. Councilmember Clarici. Okay. Councilmember Borelli?
Yes. My big concern, and I'm not quite sure I understood, you said Wilsey Road would not be the road to this project. I have just these little maps in front of me, and I just see one road that leads to this particular parcel, and so it's difficult for me to understand what you're talking about. You're talking about something that was proposed with the original.
Right, and I just
I'm
want
not
to
recognizing the name of that street.
Yes, and I just want to caution the council that this is very speculative, and again, I'm looking at what the city had imposed on the Lumsden Ranch plan development project that was 366 single-family lots, and that's a lot of lots, a lot more traffic, and so that project did not propose diverting any traffic to Wilsey Road. There was going to be a fire crash gate to allow then for safety, ingress and egress in the case of emergency. But that development was going to build a new connection to Broadway, and that was called Canyon View Drive.
So help me, where would that road be in, I mean, I know, I'm thinking Blair Road, and so where would this new road?
So I didn't supply you with copies of the Lumsden Ranch project, but anyways, it would be looking at the map with north end towards Broadway would be more of the north east section of the property. It would wind down and connect with Broadway.
That's what I can't figure out, because I'm looking, I'm up that Broadway in my head, and I can't think where another road could possibly come in, so.
I have a copy of the Lumsden Ranch EIR. I'm happy to bring it up if you wish to look at it.
It's too late. Well, that's off the table.
No. But if I can address Connie Zielinski's comments, should the applicant come in with a 4-parcel split, as I said earlier, and again, that would be based on an analysis, but I can fairly safely assume that the traffic generated by 3 additional homes is going to, 3 additional homes, because you already have one up there, is going to be so little that we would allow them access through Wiltsey, and they're not going to be required to construct that new drive for 4 homes. But anything beyond that, they probably would. But that would provide for that emergency access that Ms. Zielinski was talking about, so that they would have a way in and a way out, because they're going to have to connect to the existing Canyon View Drive. Actually, it would connect near Cedar Bluffs development at Barrett Drive.
We'll get you to speak in just a second, Mr. Hickey. I'll open it back up in just a minute to get clarification. Have any other further questions on that, Patty?
No, and I'm still not really satisfied with the road situation, so go ahead.
We'll get that answered, but before I open the public hearing back up and let you speak, I do have a further question that maybe you can answer, Pierre. First of all, let me preface my comments by saying I think all of us see that the build out of 360 plus homes on this property is extremely problematic. It's extremely problematic. We totally get that. I'm also very sensitive to the cost of development. Where California has the highest impact fees in the nation, and the cost of development is extremely difficult to achieve a viable project. So I'm very sensitive to that too. But I have to ask the question, with a general plan amendment, it must be weighed against the goals and policies and strategies of our general plan. And it caused me to look at all of our different zoning. And so, Mr. Rivas, do you think that based on that, I'm kind of putting you on the line here, is RE the best zone for this, or are there other perhaps zones that we should look at, like the R1A, that could allow us to still retain capacity for housing in our town, which we desperately need, perhaps allow the cost of development to come down on that without overly impacting the neighborhood and the surrounding areas, but also make a project viable, because that is essentially, R1A is essentially taking it to 1-acre parcels as opposed to 5-acre parcels. And with a planned development, that could mean some 2-acre parcels, some half-acre parcels, and a mixed project that could be very important to our city. So were any other zones considered?
No, staff did not look at alternatives. We basically processed the application as proposed by the applicant. But staff does agree with your statement that it's worthwhile to look at that, only because, in staff's opinion, and we did discuss this with the applicant, the city is really not in the business of creating a rural residential environment where you're not providing for city services. Then why have a city? To begin with. So I think with 1-acre parcels, the applicants could come forward with a proposal to put a PD over this, where they could concentrate densities in certain areas that are more developable and maintain a lot of the open space. And it's very similar to what the Lumsden Ranch project did. It wasn't a cookie cutter subdivision by any means. There was probably almost half of the site was left in open space to accommodate those homes. But then you're looking at the infrastructure. Then is, to me, and I don't know. I leave that to the actual developers then to look at that cost break. Where is it where the number of units would then afford the ability to pay for the necessary extension of water lines, sewer lines, and road extensions, then they could be supported by the development to occur.
Okay, all right. And certainly we want to be collaborative partners with investors in our city. So at this point, I would like to open the public comment back up because it looks like you have some items to address, Mr. Hickey, sorry, excuse me. So, Hickey, I do apologize.
Mr.
It happens all the time.
I do apologize, Mr. Hickey.
I'm immune to it. But I just want to point out again, okay, we didn't bring in a parcel map in conjunction with this because of all these big global issues that have to be addressed by the city first. And once you go into the parcel map process, you're going to go down into the implementation and engineering analysis and, and really get down in the weeds. We wanted to make sure that we were coming up with something that was compatible to the goals and vision of the city, but was also feasible and would also work for the owners who want, just simply want to, a very basic thing, create a retirement home potential. The intention, again, this is not, a part of a formal application. The intention is the 4 parcels. We've looked at siting where homes might possibly go, and Barrett up on the top has beautiful views. So there's a possibility of a couple home sites up there. The existing home sites where rental property is today, those are already in very feasible locations for a house pad, very close to roads. Also, public water is very close by, and the owners intend to hook up to public water. The extension of public water is not going to be onerous for custom home sites there. The desire is to stay with septic, and I know septic's unusual in a city environment, but honestly, this type of property, this type of terrain is unusual in a city environment. And, we're just looking for something that's a win-win, win for the city, a win for the owners. And I might even add a third win for the neighbors. The neighbors we spoke to were ecstatic that it wouldn't be pardon the expression, a jam and cram type subdivision with a lot of traffic impacts. This would really reduce the traffic impacts. It would achieve some personal goals for the owners. We feel that it's more compatible with the environment that surrounds it. We spoke to the fire chief. It's much more doable for secondary access. There is a possibility. This has to be, I don't want to speak that it's a commitment, but spoke to the fire chief about the existing crash gate that goes up to the Eschaton senior development might be possibly shared for fire egress. The connections that for the original subdivision required traversing a couple of properties to get to Broadway. That would require acquisition of right-of-way and really big costs. And also, do you want to enter into eminent domain to get those roadways? I mean, what if the owners of those properties aren't willing to sell? And you are going to make a condition that requires eminent domain? I mean, these are just some serious things to consider.
Thank you. Wait, allow the public to speak.
Pardon me. I'm sorry.
Would anyone else like to speak on this item?
Yes, I know. Thank you.
Yeah, hello, Jim.
I've been in real estate 50 years. I'm not a developer, but I do understand what it takes to develop. And when I looked at this property, and I said to myself, okay, what can make it work to fulfill your needs and my needs? I see when we ultimately have 4 parcels, 3 of them will just be home sites. One for me, one for my partner, and one will probably sell. The 4th one will sell, and that's the one that will have the high density. If we can find a developer that's willing to build and go through the process that you've been talking about, which would be a necessary process, that's great. That's good for you. It's fine for me. I'm happy. But it wouldn't be a huge project, but it'd be a project in accordance. How many can you do? It's 1 every 5 acres, right? So you're not talking a whole bunch of homes, but it'd be more, which fulfills a need you have. So that's how I look at it. We don't have the resources to do a subdivision. We have resources to do a house, but not a whole subdivision. We have to get that sold to somebody that might be willing to do that. That's been my goal all along in this project. And as far as Wiltsey Road, let's see if I can answer what the confusion is. Right now, there's about, there must be 5 cars up on the property, people that use Wiltsey Road. If we build 4 houses, if we build 3 houses and have the subdivision is not going to use Wiltsey Road. That's been established by staff. But the other 3 parcels would use Wiltsey Road. It'd be about the same impact it is now. There wouldn't be any difference. And that's why staff is saying he doesn't see any impact whatsoever. So yes, right now, if we end up getting 4 parcels, there's no development, Wiltsey Road is the access. But if there's a development, there's going to need other accesses.
Right.
I hope that answers that for you. Does it?
Okay. All right. Thank
Okay,
you very
thank
much,
you.
Jim. Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this? All right, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can see why the Planning Commission struggled with this. What we have here is a design firm that, in good faith, invested in this piece of property when it was owned and being designed by other folks, and they're now stuck in that property. That loan defaulted, and they now are the proud owners of 128. And they want to create a little bit of something out of what's out there now. Let me tell you that 35 years ago, I asked Mace Lumsden, notice the same last name, if I could buy the end of Barrett Drive to build a house. He told me, just wait a couple of years, Mark, I'm going to have this all split and the city's going to make this lot, and I'm going to sell you a view lot. 35 years ago. So there's a bit of a history here. Yeah, and I think it's really funny that you guys are going to build out at the end of Barrett, because they are beautiful. I don't know that the neighbors will like you when they find out about it, but at the moment, there are just so many uncertainties. What we have here is a group of honest gentlemen that are in a financial fix, and they're asking us to amend our general plan and amend our zone, which I'm happy to consider that, but I have no idea what these 4 parcels are going to look like. And at the moment, I haven't had a chance to ask staff or the city attorney if you could, there's in my mind right now, nothing to prevent somebody from 4-weighing it again. One of the gentlemen was nice enough to just tell us that one of the parcels they do intend to put a number of houses on, not a lot, but a few houses. So little bits and pieces of this are coming out as we're going through this hearing. And that is my problem. My obligation is to the residents and the neighborhoods and what have you of the city, and not to be worried about the financial uncertainties that have, the unfortunate things that have occurred. We practically had to shut half the city down in 2008 from the giant recession. So we know that pain very, very well. Mr. Rivas, one of the questions that's come to mind while the applicants have been speaking is it possible to restrict, because I'll be honest, I'll put it right out there, I'm afraid that it's going to be Ford by Ford by Ford. There's tremendous examples.
I have a dim memory of when I sold real estate and was kind of involved in development a little bit. There's a thing called 4x4ing, which is illegal, if I remember correctly. I share the trepidation, I think. It's a little... It's kind of hard to kind of get a good feel for it with just a giant map. Because someone did mention, I think, well, if there's 4 parcels, then someone could take one of those parcels, because you'd still be, even if you've subdivided that one parcel into 4, you'd probably be, assuming all the parcels of the first 4 are roughly the same size, you'd still be able to go to 4 more parcels on one of them, because you'd be above the 5 acres
minimum. Yeah. So.
But it's illegal. Well, I didn't bring it up. One of you brought it up, I think.
We're not going to have a back and forth.
No, I understand. I'm sorry. Yeah. But yeah, I agree with you. I had this thing.
Yeah,
I don't know.
We don't know what the boundaries are going to look like, and I will say that I absolutely love the zone recommendation from staff. Yeah. Andrew Painter's report is excellent. He outlines that under the proposed, I call it rural residential, there's a possibility of approximately 25 homes could be built on the 128 acres. That's a huge improvement over the Lumsden Ranch project. This site is all part of the Spanish Hill area that Eschaton sits on currently, and that was the Weatherstone project that was extremely contentious back in the 80s, I want to say. Pierre was probably on a planning commission at that time. A whole lot of issues. There was a tremendous amount of historic mining activity that got destroyed. And this is along that same ridge, I think, and probably the same miners at one time or another crawled across all of this. So at 350 houses, no, that is not a good fit. 25 houses, given that grades, I have to tell you, I live about 3 blocks from this. So I have some other bad news for you too, but I mean, 25 home sites is appropriate. As a city, we do have a responsibility to build as a city, not as a county. That's the county's gig. We need to get more people to hook up to the water and the sewer plant.
Yes.
So we have a responsibility to look at that, just like you gentlemen have a responsibility to try and recoup your investment.
And perhaps the proper action would be to direct staff to work with the applicant to come back with a compromise that accomplishes.
Show us at least what this four is going to look like and what kind of restrictions you'd be willing to put on it.
That accomplishes our goals as a city and theirs as property owners.
Right now, I have the feeling that I'm being asked to approve something that is not quite there. It's kind of nebulous, and it just. Again, I want to be sure. We have run into so many problems with roads, et cetera, and I just want to be sure that what's being proposed, and they're saying, they're saying what's going to be, what's going to happen. I want it in writing. I want to know for sure that, that this property is going to be serviced with, and I hate fire gates, but and I don't want to see the whole thing made up of fire gates and only one entrance and out. What I'm. I don't know if I'm making myself clear or not. One other thing I wanted to ask Pierre, in the letter that we received from Patsy Thompson, she states that she and her husband used to have a duplex on Lane Drive. And because at the time she was thinking that Wiltsey Road was going to be used. And so she's telling us all the reasons why she doesn't think it should be. But one of the things that she does mention is, she said recently George Wielden gave a series of lectures which included information about mining tunnels in that area of Placerville. And she said, in fact, he stated that attempting to fill in the tunnels was one of the reasons that the first developer of Eschaton went broke. And I do know that that area is full of that. And was that I didn't see it in our report, Pierre. Is that not right? Or is that something to be considered?
I have the environmental impact report that was prepared for Lumpson Ranch here in front of me. I can look and see if there's anything regarding mining.
I mean, if anybody knows, is George Wielden, and I'm not going to certainly go against something he said because he knows every inch of this terrain.
But again, I would just add that wouldn't be germane to what's before you.
No. Further questions or comments? Councilmember Borelli?
Not if they're not going to use Wiltsey Road.
I know this is unusual discussion up here, and I know I've already closed the public hearing, and I know you understand because you've worked on the other side of government before. I will let you. Do you have additional comments to add? Because you may come to the podium, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, we poured over the EIR from 10 years ago, and there was an identification of the high potential of some of the mining shafts being on the Texas Hill property. It's up towards the airport area, on the northeasterly area. I think the design of the subdivision prior skirted around and avoided that area, but there are mitigation requirements in the draft EIR that says if development goes forward, there has to be observation, and I don't know if it's geologists that look at old mine shafts, but that there would have to be further work looking to make sure that there was no disturbance. And certainly you wouldn't want to put a road and a bunch of houses on a
Correct.
on a mine shaft, and have it collapse.
Right.
So that area, in terms of the conceptual layouts that we have done for parcel map, and I know you can't consider those because you don't have them, but we have looked at the existing home sites accommodating two custom homes. That's where the existing rentals are, and that there's room and ample feasibility to put 2 homes in the view area of Barrett. So the intention, should the city give us a green light, was to go work with the engineer to come up with a precise meets and bounds that shows about 35 to 40 acre splits of the property, and that with the parcel map process, you have to identify your driveway, you have to identify any kind of road access, and you have to identify the home site for the area of disturbance for the trees. So we've actually began work on that, and we are looking at all that. So that would be our intention, should we get a green light, to come back with a parcel map that reflects that. And so, I mean, I can only describe to you that it's 35 to 40 acre pieces, right? And then there is this somewhat self-limiting on the 5 acres. It does limit the area of disturbance. It does limit how many potential units there are, and that reduces the traffic impact. So therefore, you don't have to do some of the huge connections that were part of the subdivision mitigation.
Okay.
So again, we're very cognizant of some of these larger environmental issues, and we would address those in the parcel map process. And I just want to clarify for you, I have no financial interest in the property other than being a consultant. The realtor that's here will be paid commission upon sale. The only ownership representative is Jim. Okay. I have nothing vested or invested in the property. I'm here as a consultant.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that.
One more brief comment.
Brief comment, I'll keep it short. I have to tell you, I'm kind of surprised with the staff recommendation that the questions I'm getting, that you guys are asking. I'm really surprised about that. So let me just change the method here a little bit. Why doesn't the city buy it from us as a park? I'm serious.
Why what?
Buy it as a park. It'd be a great park for the city. Why don't you buy it from us?
We have no money.
Raise money. Get a fundraiser.
Actually, I'd like to sell you Lumsden Park.
Yeah. We
How
can.
much?
And the homeless that go with
Okay.
it.
Well,
We
why
need
don't
to
you
bring,
do, why
we
don't
need
you
to
do
bring this back
something?
to the action at hand tonight. We need
Why
to bring
doesn't
this
the
back to
city do something about the homeless? Because the people
That's
up on
Okay.
the
Excuse me,
people
sir.
up
I'm
on
gonna-
Barrett are complaining all the
Excuse me,
time
sir. I'm
about
going to
the-
have to close the public comment on this
Yeah,
meeting.
I see how this is going. I think we'll just drop it. This is ridiculous.
No, we obviously
I'm
have
closing public.
different sets of priorities. And that was the other bad message that I had for the, I guess, the owner, not
Actually,
so
I
much
do-
the consultant.
I do have an important question.
Okay.
Director Rivas, certainly, I think we all are intrigued by the process, or by the concept of it. We take a general plan amendment very seriously. A general plan amendment could certainly come forward with a parcel split, and that way we would have the information that we would need in order to make us feel perhaps more comfortable with this rather drastic downsizing. Is that correct, Director Rivas?
I would defer to our city attorney. I don't think that the city has the ability to compel the applicants to come forward with a specific development proposal. They have a right as the
Okay.
property owner to make a request for a general plan amendment and or a rezone of the property if the rezone is consistent with that general plan land use designation.
That, what
Okay.
Pierre told you is in fact correct.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
So then, okay, so we could approve we could get another bite at this apple, I guess is what I'm trying to get at here, is that you could approve the general plan amendment, and then they would have to come back, if they ever wanted to split the property, they would have to come back with a map, and we could have the same discussion when they decide to go and do that.
But it wouldn't come back to
But
us.
it wouldn't necessarily come back to us, correct?
Oh, yeah, it goes to the planning commission, and
No, not necessarily. Pierre could actually Pierre, you can approve parcel maps, correct?
Right, the parcel map can be approved at the staff level unless there's an adjoining property owner requests to have a public hearing held, and then that would be heard by the planning commission. But if I may just add a couple of other comments. The applicant had originally looked at doing a they wanted to do a parcel map to divide the property into 4 parcels under the existing general plan land use designation and zoning. The issue with that is when staff would review that, and this is discussions we had with the applicant, I'm sure they can verify this, is that we would make sure that the creation of 4 additional parcels, it's just a large lot subdivision, or parcel map, it would be a large lot subdivision of the property. But anyways, that it wouldn't preclude ultimate development of the property that would be commensurate with the general plan and current zoning. So we wanted to see that all the appropriate easements and access were available should one of those 4 parcels come in and they want to further subdivide it to R1 20,000 half-acre lots, that kind of thing. And so you got to try and remove yourself, if you may, from looking at a specific project. When the city adopted its general plan in 1990, this was just a 128 vacant piece of property, and then the city felt through 4 years of public hearings and a public process that the current general plan and zoning was appropriate for this 120 acres, just as it is with a lot of other undeveloped properties throughout the city. And the reason why I tell you this is because that affords the council the ability to, well, we've already considered that. That's a given. Right. You don't have to look at every piece of property and say, well, the neighbors don't want it. Well, for 20 plus years, this land was suitable for 400 lots. Right. It was decided already, and you don't have to re-decide it. You then look at a specific project, and you mitigate the impacts through an environmental review process, like was done on Lumsden Ranch. And so the reason why I say that is again, you want to look closely. Is it appropriate for the city of Placerville to want to create 5-acre lots on this 128 acres? There's something in between. Because I know there were some council members that maybe thought that maybe something should be a little different. Is that what you want to create? That's what you're looking at. You're looking at a 50,000-foot elevation.
Right. Thank you for that.
Putting on your planning hat on. You're not looking at a specific project.
Right.
You go from a general plan. Is that what you want? Is that the kind of development you want?
So are we comfortable with 5-acre parcels? I mean, that's ultimately it, because no matter what these gentlemen do, and with all due respect, the investors didn't come to this piece of property and go, I love this piece of property, I want to buy it and do something with it. Someone else did that. They gave them some money. That guy defaulted. They ended up with it. Yep. And now they've got a piece of property which they may or may not, there's no feasible way to really develop it, depending on how much they owe and a bunch of other things that we don't need to know about. So we have to ask ourselves, do we feel comfortable with 5-acre zoning up there, as opposed to what it was before, which was unusual.
Can I ask a real quick question? Wasn't that a pear ranch at one time?
Well,
I remember
the whole town was a pear ranch.
No, but I remember that Lumsden had there was a pear ranch.
Yeah, I believe there might have been pears up there.
They raised. I remember.
Pear ranch. Yeah,
I mean,
it's likely.
It was.
Yeah.
Any further?
Well, an observation. The property already, and this is kind of information I've been alluding to, the 128 acres that you gentlemen are involved with is a constant source of problems for us too. And it has been ever since the Lumsden Ranch project went sideways. It is literally inaccessible homeless camps. Police service calls on the vacant property are probably daily. We've actually had one of our officers suffer a substantial injury trying to eradicate one of the camps a couple of years ago. There have, the last 3 summers, these same homeless folks that are on your 128 have lost control of their warming fires and set that hillside on fire. One of the fires was a couple of acres in size, all had to be walked in by hand. Thankfully, it was in the middle of the night, it was damp, and there was no wind. In my mind, sadly, on the wrong day, the 128 acres could be a potential Santa Rosa right into that south end of Placerville. We get a lot of north winds at the wrong time of years, unfortunately, in the fall. So to me, as a neighbor of this property for a long time, as I said 35 years ago, it has been a problem for us too. And I hear you talking about the larger parcels, and given the nature of maintaining something like that, you guys are tough. That's a lot of ground to keep fires safe and keep clean and keep the homeless people off of and keep that's not my idea of retiring yet, but so I get it, but there's been such a history with this piece of ground, and one of the things I had asked staff to do, and we just don't have the opportunity to do it, was to approach the owners and see what we could do to mitigate the fuel loading on that property. Because of Santa Rosa and Napa and other fires, my neighborhood is subject to very high scrutiny for fire insurance, and they do definitely look at all the vacant parcels. And so, having having homeless camps and all of that up there now, we already have an issue that it puts the neighborhood, the existing neighbors, at threat, if you will. So, I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
This property's been sitting there forever, and the likelihood of anything happening with it under its current set of circumstances is remote.
I agree
So
with
I guess
that.
maybe there's a couple. Let's try to posit a couple things. One is that, do we feel comfortable with the 5-acre parcels in town? I personally don't have a problem with it, kind of in a big picture sort of way. The other thing too is, maybe if we move the ball a little bit, something will happen with the property. Because as you point out, it is a hazard. It has its issues. It's a great place to walk your dog. I walk my dog up there. Actually, I never get on that parcel. I'm always on kind of the one to the other side.
You're in Jack
of it.
Casper's.
Appropriate development would be a good thing.
So
Yes.
some level
Sure.
of development might move the needle and get something going. So once again, we, because, as the gentleman said, well, we'll swap it out. And they'll just swap it out to someone else who will come back up here to the podium and probably have the same set of issues, because the way it was initially, the Lumsden Ranch concept is, I don't think it's feasible given all the things that are going on. So, do we feel comfortable with 5-acre parcels? Okay. And what was the other thing? I think that's it, pretty much. 5-acre parcels is pretty much it, because that's what they're asking us to do. So,
Well, I do have a further question with staff.
Okay.
That there was some comment that they would prefer to have the sewer system, septic, and that would not be a possibility on any development, would it, Pierre?
That's for the map.
Our code allows septic under certain circumstances.
Okay.
There needs to be a finding that because of the topography and other reasons, that it's impractical to
And there may be some
connect
areas
up.
of that land
And
that
so,
could
not
be.
being totally familiar with the land,
Sure.
I can't tell you would that apply.
Goes
Pierre?
downhill.
The only comment I'll make on that is there is a policy, and I think it's 200 feet, but that's applying to an existing legal lot. If a house were to be built on that lot and the cost is too expensive to run that lateral, that then they have the ability to put a septic system if the parcel size is such that it can be served by a on-site septic system. But that's an existing lot. If they're going to create new lots, I believe under the city's general plan, we can require public water and public sewer service to those newly created lots, not to existing lots. And I also want to point out too, because I think it's probably important, is that when you're considering the 5 acres, that's under the zoning. The general plan land use designation does allow, you could rezone it either RE, which is a 5-acre minimum size, or you can zone it R1A, which is a 1-acre minimum size. So there's a big difference in between what the general plan land use designation proposed could allow through zoning.
And if it were to be changed to an R1A, that would need to go back to the Planning Commission?
Yes, we would go back to the planning commission, then it would come back to you.
Right, okay. What is the council's pleasure on this item?
He lost me with the R1A. Why would he even consider that?
Well,
I mean,
the
that's not
R1A
what
is a
The
kind of perhaps
Yeah.
a happy medium between the R3 designation and the RE.
And the
too.
applicant is
Well,
asking
But,
for the RE.
but there's not a project that come forward, so it's, and we are not planners. So, I
Right.
mean,
Well, boy,
well,
that
this is
much-
a planning,
Anybody
a
watching
high-level
this
planning
would
document.
agree with that.
We're not developers, though.
Thank you for volunteering the R1A concept, but that might just be us kind of hanging on to some notion that we could, because we do have a critical housing shortage in town, everybody knows it. And we need more housing, and obviously if you have the potential to have a higher density, you could have more houses, but I'm not so sure that ever
It's very
once again,
problematic.
these gentlemen or some other gentlemen are going to come to us and say, this is what we want, and I feel comfortable with the
RE?
fives.
RE.
I feel comfortable with fives, me personally.
Is that a motion?
I will move that. Staff, well, I guess it's a staff recommendation, I guess, that's what I move.
Move the general plan amendment, the zone change, and the environmental
all
assessment.
all the gobbledygook, yeah, all that stuff.
Do I have a second?
So
apparently.
Vice Mayor Acuna?
Not for me. I like the idea, but not yet. So that would be the requirement, the motion would be that we would require 5-acre parcels on this. Mr. Rivas?
That would be the zone
That would
that
be the
was
zone?
applicable to this land.
That would apply to this land.
Yes, and I apologize, I didn't mean to throw further confusion. I just wanted the council to be aware that, there's two very distinct actions. One is a policy action amending the general plan to a new land use designation that downplans the ultimate density on the property, but it gives you options of the appropriate zoning. It could be RE5, it could be R1A. Per the consistency matrix that's in our general plan. So you could look at first making sure you're comfortable with the general plan change, and then you can move on to zoning. You could go ahead and approve the general plan amendment and deny the zoning. You have other options.
Okay, and that would be my motion then, to approve the general plan amendment to adopt the rural residential zone.
But there was no second on the
There was no
motion, so that
second.
motion died. That
I
motion
didn't
died.
hear you say it,
Yes.
I didn't hear you.
Yes, sorry about that,
All
yes. All right, so Vice Mayor Acuna.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The motion my first motion would be to approve the general plan amendment to the proposed rural residential for the 128 acres. My motion does not include a zone at this time. It's just the general plan amendment, putting the rural residential designation on this particular piece of property. We'll talk zone.
Is that in addition to the current zoning? No, it would just, it would
This is
replace
just
it.
the general.
It replaces the current zone.
It replaces the general plan designation.
The designation now is
Is
single-family.
Yeah,
It's
it's
the
the Lumsden
R1
Ranch.
and R3.
medium
Yeah,
density.
it's the crazy densities. So this would allow the rural residential general plan designation to apply to all 128 acres. That would be my motion. And I like that. I think it's appropriate to the site. Okay. So that motion dies for lack of a second.
Well, no, hold on, we're caught.
We're noodling it over.
We're mulling it.
If we do, okay, staff, if we do this, if we do what Councilmember Acuna suggests, and we just change the general plan designation, but we do not change the zoning part, where does it leave the gentlemen who own this property?
Your action is a policy one, so there's no, let's just say, second reading as there is on a zoning, which is an ordinance amendment. You got to come back for the second reading. So then you would approve a change to the general plan land use map to rural residential on the entire piece. They would have to. We would have to deal with the zoning because now we'll have an inconsistency between the R20,000.
Doesn't make sense.
And that's where I was having.
You see, though,
But you could direct that to come back And you can, but I've seen it before where typically you can have a caveat in that the change in the general plan land use designation will not become effective until an appropriate zoning ordinance is approved. I've seen that done in the past.
So to approve the
So-
general plan amendment,
To create the general plan designation of rural
can you
residential.
say that again, Pierre?
You can basically state that the general plan amendment shall only become effective when the applicant would come forward with a rezone consistent with that general plan land use designation. But again, it's only if you're not comfortable with the RE zoning that's currently proposed. If you're comfortable with that, you can approve the whole thing. But if you're considering an alternative like the R1A, because there's actually in the general, I'm looking in the general plan now, you have the choice of RE, R1A, you have open space, and public facilities. All four of those zoning districts are consistent with the rural residential land use designation. But I guess in this case, we're looking at residential, so you have a choice of estate residential or R1A, single family, 1 acre.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Point of clarification. In a past life, it was customary to do these as separate motions because you're actually doing two things. And there's connections and implications between the two, and they do have to work together, as Mr. Rivas has outlined for us. So I am taking this as the first step, which is necessary for one of two, to go ahead and apply the rural residential general plan land use designation to this parcel.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Could I
Yes.
suggest, and it could happen tonight, it could happen in the future, but that, as Mr. Rivas has suggested, not become effective until such time as a ordinance has been adopted that has zoning consistent with that general plan designation.
I would include that wording in my motion.
I will second that. Yeah. All right, let's take a roll call vote on this item.
Vice Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Mayor Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Clarici?
All right, well, that was messy.
And now,
And-
regarding the zoning, because
Yes.
it's been agendized and properly noticed, then that's the one that really is the public notices, correct, John? When you change the zoning? Yeah. Would it make sense to direct it back to staff and the planning commission to look at the R1A and the RE, and also perhaps obtain some additional information from the intentions of what the current applicants intend to do with the parcel? Would that be allowable?
I would defer to our city attorney for direction based on the motion.
Again,
Yeah.
the application exists without having to have
Any
a
conditions.
project attached to it.
Right.
I mean,
Send it back.
if the applicant provides you information, it's not going to be binding. You know, they can say, we want to do this with the property, and they can change their mind 2 days later.
Right.
So-
That's,
So what would be your recommendation based on the first action?
Well, at some point in time, you're going to have to adopt an ordinance that's consistent with that general plan amendment. And whether you do that tonight or whether you want more information on the pros and cons of 1A versus the 5-acre zoning, that's whatever you folks desire. But you can certainly send it back to staff to provide you with more information as to which zoning designation you want to go to in terms of the ordinance.
I think I would feel more comfortable with getting staff's perspective on that. And our ultimate goal is a win-win project. And I know it doesn't seem like it tonight, but we certainly want, what will work best for this property inside our city limits. And,
Can I ask a question of staff? Pierre, would you be able to provide us with just a 30,000-foot overview of where our 1A and RE would fit on the parcel now that it has this designation?
Yeah, staff would rely on the property owner or the property owner's agents to actually make a proposal to staff
Okay.
for staff to review and analyze. Staff wouldn't just go ahead and do it on its own.
Okay.
So actually,
Did you make a motion?
no, I didn't, no.
We've already voted.
No, there's another item on, that we can direct staff back to provide more information for the application of the two zones as discussed, RE and R1A,
Rural residential.
rural residential.
And
Yeah, so
R1A.
you've got a general plan and designation, and you've got a zoning with different names, just to make it more confusing. John?
I'm just
Big
wondering.
sigh.
Estate residential.
Estate residential.
I'm just wondering what do we think we're going to get? I mean, I know that we'll get something, but exactly what, I'm just struggling with what that additional knowledge would provide us in terms of what the folks kind of have in their heads that we don't already know, or don't know because there's no thing in front of us.
Yeah.
And and we should pull these guys out of the equation and say, is R1A or RE, like whether they do something with it or some successor does it, is that going to satisfy our thoughts around this?
Well, I don't think, from my perspective, we've not had the ability to have staff's recommendation on, just forget any projects from a zoning, overall zoning overview of what this means for the impact of our city, to reduce it by 93%, basically. And like Director Rivas said, this was, whether we agree with the current zoning on this or not, which sounds like we don't, that 366 homes is not appropriate nor feasible, but it was born out of 4 years of a public process. And we've not had staff's recommendation on the current zoning categories. So.
There's whispering over in this corner. Recommendation from the city manager or the city attorney?
No, he's not going to get it.
Gosh, boy, I didn't go anywhere. Well, Pierre, you've heard the questions and the concerns that we've had. Do you feel like your department could provide us with some additional information, given you had, say, 2 more weeks, and talk with the applicants? And they've heard our concerns, too, and the history of this property.
Probably not in 2 weeks. I think we're going to need a little bit more time than that based on our current workload.
Sure.
Yeah. But we're happy to work with the applicants and their agents to come up with a good solution.
Mark, does that seem reasonable?
So we're not, actually, this is council, Mark, this is council action. This is council action at this point, yeah. So.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, no problem. So at this time, I will make a motion to direct staff to bring this back at, with no time sensitive, I mean, no time, we're not going to direct a time to come back, but in a reasonable manner that works with the applicant and with our staff's workload to provide the council with additional information on what the zone change would mean to this particular property.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
Is there anything from?
I'm going to vote aye.
Notice?
Yeah, aye. We're all.
All right, it's unanimous,
We're all
so.
in on this. Okay.
I apologize, this was a messy process tonight, and,
Big piece of ground, though.
yeah, we look forward to getting the
I
right
don't think any
information to make
apologies are necessary. We're
appropriate
doing this
decision.
for the good of
Yeah,
the city,
it's a big
and, you know,
decision.
we're doing our job, and,
decision.
you know.
So thank you. We'll take a 5-minute recess on this. All right, we will reconvene this meeting. Thanks for hanging around out there.
Some people just are gluttons.
All right. We are on item 12.1, adopt a resolution ratifying an agreement with Lawson Mechanical Contractors for the repair and replacement of the existing sodium hydroxide pump manifold system at the. All right, Mr.
Second.
Rivas. I'll second that.
I just seconded
I'll
it. Did it? Strawberries.
Oh,
We have to have
One thing,
I know. I know.
just make mention of one thing, and I think, and I talked to Pierre about this, about the previous on. Someone get back to Ms. Patsy Thompson and let her know kind of what happened, and because she wrote us a very nice letter.
Yes, she did.
And just to say, hey, this is what happened, and your concerns were talked about, blah blah blah.
I
think it would
I
be-
will do that. I will reach out to her.
That would be a good neighborly
Awesome,
thing.
Mr.
All right.
Former Mayor.
Item 12.1. Mr. Rivas?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Just a real quick background. The request is to basically fix our sodium hydroxide, also known as caustic soda, at our wastewater treatment plant. And just so that everybody understands, caustic soda is used as a alkaline neutralizing chemical in the treatment of our wastewater. In order to maintain the optimal pH conditions for biological activity, there must be sufficient alkalinity present in the wastewater to neutralize acids generated by the active biomass during waste treatment. So this is some background as to why this system is important. So the sodium hydroxide pump manifold system has been deteriorating over the past few years due to its age, but mainly due to inferior pipe joints that are manifested through frequent leaks in the chemical piping. Sodium hydroxide is extremely caustic, corrosive, and requires special handling to ensure safety of plant personnel. This project was approved and adopted by council in your fiscal year 2017-2018 capital improvement program budget, which did appropriate $20,900 in Measure H funds for the system improvement. The total cost here is going to be $19,000 with Lawson Mechanical Contractors, which is within the scope. Just to give you an update, because it was leaking very profusely, we went ahead, and that's why this is a ratification as opposed to approving. So the work is essentially about 90% completed. So staff right now is doing the electrical connections and work to it prior to bringing then Lawson to come in and do the final tie-in to the system, which hopefully will occur within the next couple of weeks. So with that, staff is recommending you ratify the agreement with Lawson Mechanical Contractors for the replacement of the existing sodium hydroxide pump manifold system for a total amount of $19,000 some odd dollars, and then authorizing the Director of Development Services or designee to execute the same. That concludes staff's report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? All right. Any members of the public wish to speak on this item? All right.
I'll move approval of item 12.1.
I'll second that.
All right.
Oh.
All those in favor? Oh, no. Roll
Money,
call.
money, money, money.
Spending money. Don't you remember?
Vice Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Mayor Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Clarici?
All right, good.
Aye.
Well, that's ratified. All
Moving
right. Item 12.2, adopt a resolution retroactively approving a memorandum of understanding between the city and the El Dorado County for the Sheriff's Office to provide dispatch services for the police department, and authorizing the Chief of Police and Police Commander to execute the same, and approving a $15,864 budget appropriation from the General Fund contingency for unforeseen expenditures. Chief Ortega.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What this basically is we have basically run out of dispatchers, and we're in the process of recruiting and hiring some new candidates. My senior dispatch
She looks
dispatch
tired.
records technician came tonight, and her and Commander Nida have been working diligently to find candidates. But I kind of tried to walk you through in your staff report how we got to where we are, and it wasn't something. It's not a place I like to be, but it was a matter of one person resigned, the other person who was a dispatcher we approved to promote her to police officer recruit, who will come back and be a police officer for us after her graduation from the academy in May. But with the resignation of our other person that was a dispatcher, and effective January 1st, I was left with the inability to fully staff the dispatch center 24 hours a day. So staff and I sat down and worked out this solution. It's done mostly with salary savings in the existing budget, with the exception of the $15,000 and change that you saw earlier. That may get better if, depending on how fast we can hire, recruit, and train our new candidates. So right now, they're only the Sheriff's Department is graciously only dispatching at night. We kind of had some preliminary talks in preparation for this possibility, and they've helped us out greatly. So in the daytime, you still have our dispatchers working for us. I won't go into the technical things that we have to do at night to make it work, but so far it's been a very good setup, and it's been seamless. Our citizens will not notice any difference in service.
Wow, that's
And with that, I would recommend that we ratify this MOU, and I'll answer any questions from the council.
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge all of our staff's hard work for, working through these. Staffing challenges are incredibly difficult, and Crystal, appreciate you being here tonight. And also like to thank the Sheriff's Department for working with us to make sure that our citizens are served for all their safety needs. So that's we always like to see wherever we can share services when appropriate and help each other out. That's great. Does council have any questions for our police department?
Nope.
I have a curious question.
All right.
Why is it so difficult to find a dispatcher? Somebody who qualifies?
So, number one, to try to recruit the right person. We want the right people to work for our city.
And who is that right person?
Well, that was my next part.
Besides Crystal. She's sitting out there.
Obviously, Crystal.
Go down there, Patty.
But the other part of it is, and I think I mentioned it in the staff report, we've done several backgrounds, post-mandated, state-mandated backgrounds. And there are just some people that just don't pass the process. That's the best way I can put it, Councilmember Borelli.
Is it like previous being drug use or arrests, or that's what I was curious about.
It can be all of the above. Generally, it has to do, there may be arrests, but it can also be a question of character. Did they lie in their background? Have they lied in the past? Have they been terminated for other reasons? Is there other employment issues?
Okay.
It just doesn't, that's not what we're looking for.
No.
In this business, our integrity and our honesty is definitely higher than the general expectation of any other employer.
That's an extremely difficult job.
It is, yes,
I don't think I could do it.
I know
Extremely
I couldn't
difficult.
do it.
Yeah. So we're not who you're looking for. Sorry.
Nope. We'll stand here.
Well, if any of the council members are looking, I'll hire you.
With that, I'd like to open public comment on that. Crystal, would you like to say anything? You've sat through this whole meeting.
Yes. Please come up and say, give us your
Come
insights.
to the podium. Come to the podium. No? All right. I remember when you were hired. We're grateful you're with us. Yeah, I remember that. We appreciate your services.
I'll move the item.
Second. All right. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Mayor Thomas?
Absolutely aye.
Councilmember Clarici?
Aye.
Great. Thanks so much. And thanks for being here tonight, Crystal.
Thank you, Chief.
All right. Item 12.3, and I'm not going to read this whole
I was
thing.
gonna say-
I'm not, but I'm going to. This is to adopt a resolution approving a construction contract with Siblin Reed for the Madronia Giovanni Lift Station Rehabilitation Project, finally, in an amount not to exceed $1,039,500, and authorizing the city manager to execute, to authorize the associated budget changes to fund the project, as directed in staff.
Nicely
Thank you,
done.
thank you.
Now, let's see if staff is up to matching that challenge.
Mr. Rivas, you're on again.
Brevity. I
Oh,
don't
I'm
think
sorry. Why does it say Mr. Rivas here? Hi, Rebecca.
That's also appropriate. He's the director.
That is true. That is true.
Good evening, Mayor Thomas, members of the council. As per staff's report to council, this item is before you to award the construction contract for the Madrone and Giovanni lift stations to Siblon Reed in the amount of $1,039,500 with the and along with the consultant contract to REY Engineers in the amount of $124,262 for construction management, and an amendment to the design contract with Dominichelli and Associates in the amount of $24,950 for construction engineering services to support and supplement limited city resources. Both Madrone and Giovanni lift stations have exceeded their useful life with the equipment currently in place, and this project will rehabilitate not only the wet wells and the connected pipe infrastructure, but also the electronics and the telemetry for communication with the city's water reclamation facility. These two facilities have also been identified as a source of inflow and infiltration, which has been impactful and costly to the treatment plan. This project was originally approved in the adopted budget for the 2002-2003 fiscal year and has been a priority project to the city for some time now, over 15 years, with no complete funding source identified. When Measure H was passed, this project was identified as one of the first projects and primarily funded through that city sales tax measure. Thanks to Measure L being passed in November 2016 by Placerville voters, the remaining necessary funds, along with sewer enterprise funds, a source derived from sewer rate payments, this project is now fully funded. As outlined in staff's report, the Measure HL committee will be meeting in March, and at that time we will actually make the request to secure the remaining contingency amount for a total contingency value of $100,000 for any unforeseen items encountered in the field during construction. Staff's recommendations to council are outlined in the report under tonight's agenda item, and that concludes staff's verbal report. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Well done, Ms.
Awesome.
Neves, well done.
Excellent.
I'm impressed. Does staff have any?
I have another
I hope it's not a curious question.
It is. It's a curious question.
It's getting
We've
late.
obviously been limping along.
Oh,
Yes, ma'am. That's putting it politely.
yeah, that is.
So what does that entail?
To speak just on Giovanni, if the pump goes down inside the wet well, there is no mechanical device to pull the pump out of the wet well.
Oh.
So what happens is a series of makeshift pulleys and chains that get wrapped over a beam that is supporting and covering the wet well in terms of a shack that might be held together by termites holding hands. And then that is how they are able to hoist out the pump out of the wet well. That's just one example.
Okay.
And so I think the gentleman that maintains those
I knew
daily.
that, stuff was going on, but I just
Yes,
wanted to emphasize why this is so necessary. And how, after this whole new structure is put in, what is the lifetime?
About 30 years.
30 years?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Cool.
All right.
Okay, I have a point. In Italian, it's Giovanni, not Gio. You don't say all the letters. It's Giovanni. I know this because this is actually my name. So, Giovanni.
My apologies.
Okay,
I'm German.
just for the future.
This
for
is
the
from the
future.
town that does Jake Way.
I need to get a plaque made.
Jacquier.
Yeah, I know.
All right, with
Giovanni.
that, I'll open public comment up. Come on down, Sue.
Okay, so
Yay.
you've waited 9 years for this, I think.
Come on down.
I know I've been
Let's celebrate.
Giovanni and Madro lift stations have been on the list from the Measure H committee when we first got together with.
That's right.
And when Measure H and L committee got together, it's still on the high priority list. Both of these are failure risk is high, and the consequences of failure are not anything we would be proud of in Placerville. This would impact a number of homes and families. They've waited this long to get done because other projects higher on the crisis list pushed them down, and getting funding together enough to do them. Both lift stations, as Rebecca says, are way past their useful life. They are, as Rebecca says, hanging together by termites, holding hands, and a wing and a prayer, and just plain old good luck. And they've got to be rehabilitated. By doing both together, the city takes advantage of more favorable bids with economy of scale and duplicate design, so that you can have one set of replacement parts instead of having to have individual and being very different. So great work from our city engineers. They brought in another very badly needed project for implementation. So great work.
Thank you so much. All right, any other comments, Ted?
Ted?
All right, good. Close public comment.
Quick question for staff.
Yeah.
Anticipated completion of construction, since we've very scarily detailed how these things are hanging on.
As I mentioned, we're replacing the electronics and the telemetry, and there's about a 3-month order lead time on those items. So Sybil and Reed, when we issue them the signed contract this week, they will begin process of ordering those items.
Okay.
Once they arrive, construction in the field will take about a month and a half or so by the end of summer.
End of summer. Great. Thank you.
Were these lift stations originally required of the people that put in the subdivisions up there? Or is this something that the city had to do?
They are city-owned, and they do support those homes. As far as the original conditions that were put in place when those lift stations were built, I don't recall, but they are ours.
So obviously it wasn't carried through that they...
No, unfortunately, it was not. Although hindsight being 2020, it would be something that would be worth looking
And
at.
I think we ought to, put that on our list.
Yes, ma'am.
We can make the guys that own that Lumsden.
With that, I will move staff's recommendation on this item.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Hey.
Give it to John.
It's okay.
All right, Giovanni.
Giovanni, please.
Sorry.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Acuna?
Aye.
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Mayor Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Clarici?
Aye.
All right. With that, we have council reports from other agencies. I know, transit. Vice Mayor Cunha. Or Councilmember Borelli.
No. Well, I
went.
John went in...
Oh, that's right. You went.
And I
Who's
did
on
go do
first?
my walkthrough with Mindy and have got all my
You're back on the bus.
familiarization stuff.
You are back on the bus.
The bus has got a lot bigger since
There
I
wasn't
was
much to report. They didn't. I don't recall much.
The taxi voucher.
Oh, the taxi voucher
and
thing.
And the card, Connect card.
Yeah, but
were
that
the
was
two
pretty
things
much
that we
it. It was pretty light.
All
We
right.
got done very quickly.
El Dorado County Transportation Commission. Councilmember Borelli or?
Well, I brought this in
Yep.
case you want to, it was really a quick meeting.
Yeah, another
but,
one, yeah.
Because the Board of Supervisors had to go to Tahoe.
Yeah, they had to go to Tahoe.
I think there's one thing that I
there's
would
one-
like to, is that the Highway 50 hotspot study, and I'm so, we're all just really excited about this, that, that we're getting the, that's to look at the traffic lights on 50, basically, and how we can do long-term fixes for that project, or problem that is not going to go away and is growing. And
Which
so
problem is this?
Caltrans is working
Highway 50
with
lights,
us, Highway 50
traffic.
lights.
Westbound.
Eastbound,
East-
westbound,
both
the lights.
directions.
bounds.
They're not
what's-
working?
No, Mark, the traffic on Highway 50.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Long night.
So,
You requested.
Thank you.
so Caltrans is doing a study of it, and we're going out for the
Jovan.
consultant selection this spring, which is
That's
very
excellent.
exciting to
That
get
is
this
excellent. I
project
know
going.
that.
Absolutely.
So we have data to know what we need to mitigate, so we can look at all the ramifications and the options. So just really excited
They're
to
also
have
looking
that
at
moving forward.
Apple Hill traffic.
Yep.
Summit traffic coming out of Sierra Ski Ranch, and then Myers and that associated areas. That's why it's called the Highway 50 hotspot.
And it will be a standalone element of the broader District 3 recreation travel hotspot transportation management study.
Which is
Right.
what it
It's a
should have
very
been,
comprehensive
and bringing
study.
in all the
Exactly.
the elements that John just mentioned.
Exactly.
They're all contributing.
From a
It's not
comprehensive
just, we
standpoint.
used to blame it on Apple Hill,
Right.
and it's not Apple
Oh,
Hill.
we'll just blame it
So
on
that's
them
really
anyway,
good.
but that's-
LAFCO, Vice Mayor Cunha.
We met and everything's just fine.
Okay, great. SACOG, Councilmember Cleary.
Thursday.
Thursday, all right. 2x2, I haven't had one yet. All right. Requests for future agenda items.
Oh, I had one, and I'll make it quick. And I think Cleve's already got it. A report from Animal Control. Because they had, I didn't realize that they were here in August and had promised us quarterly reports
Yeah,
on their
well,
services and their calls and their
we
their
wanna know about
expenses.
the roosters.
And I also wanted to ask for an update on the roosters at
Okay.
Lumsden Park.
Super. City manager.
He is scheduled to be here at your next meeting.
Oh, good. Oh, thank you so much. That
Magical.
was great.
See, just like
City manager and staff report. So we'll start with you, Ms. O'Connell. Good evening.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you are aware, the recruitment period for the Planning Commission closed yesterday, February 12th.
Great.
After being publicly noticed and advertised in various ways for several weeks. Staff has received 2 applications for the 1 unexpired term on the commission. Staff would like to recommend to the City Council either extending the recruitment period to allow for more applications to be received, or close the recruitment and move forward with the interview process. If the City Council chooses to move forward with the interview process, staff would like to suggest a day, possibly next week, to hold the public interviews to allow enough time for the new commissioner to prepare for the first Planning Commission meeting in March. Or if that's too soon, we can look at maybe scheduling it something for the following week. But I can work with each of you to determine a date that works for the full council.
Okay, and this is just for the planning commission? We're
Just
not
for the
talking about
planning commission.
the peak, because that's a different interview
That's a
process.
different issue,
Right.
right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. What is the council's pleasure as far as
Let's talk to these
next
two
week?
brilliant people that want to be on our
Yeah,
plan.
absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yes,
So
let's do that.
work with us to come up with a date, and
I can
I
do
know
that.
I will be gone through Monday of next week. But after that, I'll be back.
Can I go back to agenda items?
Well,
Sure.
let's finish our staff reports.
Okay, let's
Sorry.
finish this.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Do you need any other direction with us?
No, that's
Okay, we're just delighted that you folks are looking at our serving a really important role of our planning commission. They serve a
Likewise.
vital role for the city council as well as the city. So look forward to chatting with them. Great.
Mayor,
Yes.
just to mention quickly along those lines, we did receive 2 applications for Economic Advisory Committee
Great.
also.
Great.
So I'll work with you and Vice Mayor Acuna to set up those interviews.
Good. We'll look forward to chatting with them too. All right. Did you have additional comment?
On the agenda.
All right.
Over the last month or so, I have been talking to folks about bringing up the issue of cannabis sales in the city limits. Things are starting to happen in other parts of the state. The county's doing their thing, and I thought it would be time for us to start to look at that. Talked to some folks, gotten some sample ordinances along this line, and Cleve and I have talked.
Use the word sample.
I said sample ordinances.
Good thing you
sample
Right
ordinances.
up.
You know, this is the problem. We all go back to like junior high school on this particular subject. Okay. Anyway, so not the next meeting, but soon I'd like to start to gin that up and bring it before us. Gin. Anyway.
All right. It is a timely issue. All right. So with that,
So I
we
would
will
approve
adjourn
that.
to February 27th with a bunch of items on our, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, February 27th, 5:30 p.m. closed session, 6 p.m. regular meeting. And happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Thank you for staying with us tonight. Good night.